Aloha, everyone. My name is Rob Hack. I'm from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council in Honolulu. We are a board of volunteers who are vetted by the U.S. Commerce Department, and we work to help Hawaii and Pacific Island companies export. And by export, of course, we mean to foreign countries and not to another island or to the mainland, but to Japan and Singapore and Germany and Brazil and Canada and other foreign countries. We are one of 61 district export councils, or DECs, in the United States, and we cover a vast territory out here in the Pacific with CNMI and Guam and Hawaii, American Samoa as part of our charge. And again, our focus is just helping companies export. We're very fortunate to be able to put on this series of seminars and conduct one-on-one mentoring with our local Hawaii companies because of a generous grant that we received from DBED. And in turn, DBED gets a grant from SBA in Washington, D.C. That's called the HiSTEP program, or State Trade Expansion Program. In Hawaii, that's rebranded to HiSTEP for the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program. And to talk for a few minutes about the HiSTEP program is the DBET manager in charge of this program is Jamie Lum. So Jamie, please tell us about HiSTEP.
Thank you, Rob. Aloha and good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for our Export University 101 session. Thank you to Rob for putting this together, and for our speakers that have agreed to be part of this. Larry Foster, Brian Suzuki, Kanzo Naro, thank you very much for joining us. So as I'm Jamie Lum, again with DBED, and as Rob has already mentioned, we are a recipient on behalf of the state of Hawaii of a HiSTEP grant from the SBA, which we in turn, as Rob mentioned, put together the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program, or HiSTEP. And you'll see these logos that are on your screen. We work with all of these different partner organizations to put the program together, so DBED doesn't do it alone. And we do thank HPEC for putting together all of the webinars that we have, which are part of our HiSTEP. So what is HiSTEP? It is an export development program. The intent US-wide is to increase the amount of US exports. And then of course that translates in Hawaii for, we wanna see more companies selling in the global marketplace. We wanna see our Hawaii companies getting all the Hawaii-made manufactured goods and services out there. We want to see a larger dollar amount of goods and services being sold out there, as well as number of companies. And we want to see our that our Hawaii products and services are penetrating more of the global market. So to do this, we have three integrated parts, components of HiSTEP. And thank you, Rob, for putting up our website here, so you can get really the full information about our HiSTEP program here on our website, invest.hawaii.gov, under the exporting tab. So the three components are our export readiness, our Hawaii pavilions, and our company assistance. So this webinar that you are part of right now is part of the export readiness program. So through Rob and HPEC, there are monthly webinars on various export-related topics and market-related topics throughout the year. So as Rob has up here, our schedule, so the next one after today's, next month, we'll have the e-commerce for Hawaii exporters to Japan. So you can go to our website and register for these webinars. And also part of the export readiness, as Rob mentioned, also is our one-on-one business consulting. So after companies register for HiSTEP, we will partner you with one of our HiSTEP partners, either with a be it HPEC or the Small Business Development Centers, the Patsy Make Center, the Veterans Business Opportunities Council. So you will have a chance to meet with these expert business consultants and be able to talk with them a little bit about your business. And if you're new to export, what your goals might be. If you're already exporting, maybe ways of expanding. But really what we want you to do is to have an export plan and to be able, through HiSTEP, be able to execute that plan in some way. So that's all part of the HiSTEP export readiness. Then we have our Hawaii pavilions, which are trade shows in which either DBED or we're also working with our Hawaii Department of Agriculture. We will purchase booths, booth space, and then we'll recruit companies, Hawaii companies, to exhibit with us all under the Hawaii banner. You'll see the shows that we have on our calendar for 2022. As you know, in the last, almost going on 2 years now, many trade shows have not been held in person. They've been going virtual, but we are confident and are told by these show organizers that they do intend to have these in-person shows. So we do have these on the calendar, and I would advise you to just, in case there are any changes, to keep checking our website. But what we'll do is we will put out a recruitment notice to companies that we're going to be attending a particular show, and then companies can sign up with us. The HiSTEP funds go to subsidize the majority of the cost for participating in the trade show. So we try to make it affordable for our small businesses to be part of the show, because we know that it can be very expensive. So we do charge a small participation fee, but it's maybe only about a quarter of what it would cost for you to be in the trade show. And then, we feel that there is an advantage of exhibiting under the Hawaii banner, being part of the Hawaii brand. That's a very powerful brand out there in the global marketplace. And then companies also find that being with other Hawaii companies and sharing sort of exporting experience is also very helpful to them throughout the show. So that's our Hawaii pavilions. And then lastly is our company assistance, which companies can apply for direct financial assistance. It's actually on a reimbursable basis, however. But once you have an export plan, you can put in an application for funds to help support activities in your export plan. So this year we have divided it into 2 categories, one for new to export companies and one for market expansion companies. So if you're interested in that, I would advise you to really go through this webpage and look at the instructions. We do it through an RFP process. It's a competitive process, so there are a limited amount of funds. So the applications are available now, and they are due January 14th, 4 p.m. Friday, January 14th. So again, if you're interested, please take a look at this. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me or anyone from our DBED team. But I encourage you again to go to our website. In that gray box, the very last line says registration. That's where you would start, is to submit your HiSTEP registration form. Now that's different from applying for company assistance. There's a separate application for that. But we want companies to register, to give us information about your company and some of your, so we know a little bit about your exporting background. Again, this is open to companies that are not exporting at all, to those that are already exporting. So just so that we can get some information about your company, and then we will put you in touch with one of the partner organizations so that you can begin consultation. So thank you very much again for
registration. Is free, right, Jamie? Yes,
registration, it's free. There's no cost to register, and there's no obligation to participate really in any of the programs. It doesn't obligate you at all. So we just want information about your company, and it just indicates to us that you have an interest in exporting.
Great.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much. Here's a quick agenda of what we will accomplish today. I wanted to jump down to our tentative schedule of these events coming up here. The kickoffs we've already done, obviously. Exporting of agricultural products was a great webinar we had last month. You're here at Export University 101. I'm confident in the date of January 6th for the e-commerce for Hawaii exporters to Japan. That will focus on Rakuten and Amazon Japan. After that, the dates are a little bit tentative, but Jamie alluded to writing an export plan. And this year, for the first time, we're having an export plan writing workshop. It'll be 2 sessions later in the HiSTEP 2022 cycle. The first session will be on August 11th, and then the follow-up session on September 8th. And that'll really help our companies develop detailed export plans that can be part of their overall marketing plan, which is part of the master business plan. Okay, so that's our schedule, and that leads us right into the first module today, which is legal. And often companies that are new to exporting get very concerned about this topic of legal issues and what's different between Hawaii law and foreign law, and how to enter that market, how to find distributors, how to legally obligate distributors to do things. And we have one of the foremost experts in Hawaii today to talk to us. That is Larry Foster. And Larry, give me a second while I switch over. You can start sharing your screen anytime, Larry.
Okay. Don't mean to show you my email. Okay. Okay. Aloha. So I'm going to talk about legal issues for exporters. I should note that I myself am an exporter. I've been exporting services to China for about 15 years, services in the way of training programs for young Chinese lawyers. I used to do it in person, and various political and pandemic issues have not allowed me to go back to China. So now I do it by Zoom out to China.
Sorry, Larry, sorry to interrupt you, but we still see your email.
Oh, my screen shows that I'm legal issues for okay, let me. Is that better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed my email. I think there's nothing too untoward in it, I hope. Okay, legal issues for exporters. Let me just get rid of the thumbnails here. So I'm a law professor, and at UH Law School, our class sessions run 75 minutes. So I'm going to try not to go 75 minutes. I'm planning on about a half-hour presentation, and there'll be time for some Q&A. As I go through the slides, if you have any questions, go ahead and use the chat function or whatever, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. So the first slide, you need to be sure that your business affairs are in order. What do I mean by that? Check your company or your social media profile. Yelp reviews, Better Business Bureau, what's your standing with the Better Business Bureau. If you have some problems, particularly on social media, that where people have been kind of saying bad things about you, you should look up a company called Reputation Defender. They help you build up your online profile. and they can't scrub the bad stuff, but they can sort of bury it in an avalanche of positive things. So one is sort of, what's your social media profile? People happy with you, unhappy, whatever. The next topic is intellectual property issues. So if you're using a product, do you have the intellectual property or a license to use someone else's intellectual property? So you need to sort of think through those things. If it's your intellectual property, is it protected? So if you have a slightly larger company where you have employees, make sure their employee contracts have things like non-compete clauses, confidentiality clauses, so that your employees, former employees, cannot steal your intellectual property. The IP is a very important issue. A few years ago, I'm not sure if it's still going on, but there was a rash of Japanese copycats. The Japanese love everything Hawaiian, and they love Hawaiian company names, L&L Barbecue, whatever. And they will steal your identity and take it over. So Japan, a couple of years ago, there was a hula halal that had taken on the name of a very well-known Hawaii hula halal. It turns out the Hawaiian hula halal had never registered their trade name. So it's very easy for the Japan one to register it and take the name of the halal. So you had to be very careful of these things. I assume a number of you have started off in the craft fair business, and more recently pop-up makeke. If you've done particularly the craft fairs, if you want, well, you can't wander through craft fairs anymore, but if you wander through a craft fair, actually there's some this season, you see some people who are just going around taking pictures. Well, guess what they're doing? They're taking pictures of your product so that they can take those pictures home and make a copy, if you will, of your product. So you have to be careful that all your products have some kind of intellectual property protection. Are your business affairs in order? Are you a corporation, a partnership, or just friends that got together? I would recommend some kind of a formal business arrangement for a couple of reasons. One, it protects you against liability, particularly if it's a corporation. If you have a product that has a potential to do harm to somebody, you want to protect yourself against that. And the simple way to do that is form a corporation. And there can also be some tax benefits or for incorporating or even having a partnership. Compliance. Are you in compliance with local and state and federal agencies? So, for example, are you in good standing with DCCA here in Hawaii? Have you been paying your excise taxes? Make sure that you are compliant with all of these things. Maintain good corporate records. Get some water here. If it's a corporation or even a partnership, you have bylaws. Make sure that you're complying with those bylaws. You have regular meetings of board of directors and these kinds of things. All of these things, make sure you can maintain that protection that being a corporation or a partnership gives you. Short new topic. There's a lot of export terms in exporting. There's 12 more common ones, or most frequently used ones, and that is CIF and FOB. What they go to is who bears the risk of loss if you ship your goods to Japan. So if there's a hurricane and the ship sinks, or there's a fire on the ship and the goods are destroyed, who bears the risk of loss? you or the person to whom you're exporting it. So you need to pay attention to these terms in your contract with your buyer to be sure that you have protection. Let me go to the next slide. This is I think this is a nice visual thing about this, the difference between CIF and FOB. Use a written contract, particularly, well, if you're just doing a one-off, selling a jar of honey to Mr. Yamamoto in Osaka, then you don't need a contract for that. But if you're shipping to a distributor or something like that, and they're going to handle all the work in Japan, be sure you have a written contract. You'll hear a lot of excuses given from the other side as to why you don't need a contract. In China, one of the most common one, we're friends. Don't you trust me? Friends trust friends. And your answer should be, of course I trust you, but, and then you explain why you have to have a contract. Another thing that comes up is, why spend so much money for a lawyer? We don't need lawyers. And I go back to World War II, a slogan, an ounce of protection is worth a pound of cure. A contract is, I think, a necessary cost to avoid a lot of downstream problems. Another thing that comes up often is, well, contracts are impossible or too difficult to enforce in X jurisdiction. Well, that could be true, but, and here comes all the buts. If you have a contract, it gives you some sense that there's clarity about the deal. Both parties are on the same page. You have it down in writing. You maybe negotiate a little bit, so everybody's clear as to what the deal is. Even though they might not be enforceable, they do help to prevent potential breaches. They may cause the other party to comply if they know the potential consequences. Excuse me. In law, we like to use a lot of Latin. So it's called the Interrom Effect. You scare them, you terrorize them. If you don't perform, then I'm going to sue you, and yada, yada, yada. You probably can't, if you're in China, that's not going to make much of a difference because it doesn't have an effect. But sometimes just the fact that you say you're going to sue them, the terror effect will make a difference. The good news is that the great majority, 95% of contracts are performed without any issues on either side. But there's still going to be that 5–10%, and you don't want to find yourself in that 5%. Be sure that your lawyer, this is very important, be sure that your U.S. lawyer understands the law and the language of the jurisdiction to which you plan to export your product. There's a lot of lawyers in the U.S., but few of them work internationally. There's a lot of people that have language ability, bilingual, but they don't know the law. You need to find someone who has both language and legal knowledge to help you navigate your export issues. New topic, U.S. export controls. You can't just export stuff willy-nilly. You might need to have a federal export license. And how do you find that out? Well, you go to this website here, and they explain to you what kind of goods require export license. One example is raw honey. I was watching Papa Makeke last week, a couple of days ago anyway, and there was a honey farm on Maui making what looked like really, really good raw honey. And what came to my mind is this website here. Do you need to register that? You need to get a license from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So you go to this webpage and see if you need to get an export license for that. Depending on the political state of the country that you're in, we may have some anti-boycott regulations. The U.S. government has an official governmental boycott of certain goods and services around the world in different countries. You need to make sure that what you're selling does not run afoul of that. Trafficking in endangered species, whalebone. I know a lot of people, not a lot of people, there are people who are very, very good artisans, and they take a whalebone and in Alaska, they call it scrimshaw. They sort of etch out things in the whalebone. That's trafficking in an endangered species if you sell it. Ivory, rare woods. An example of a rare wood thing that came up a while back. There's an organization in Honolulu that was holding a meeting in Tokyo, and they wanted to present certificates at this program. So they looked around and they wanted really fine mounting for it, frame for it, and they got a particularly good piece of wood for the frames. Well, it turned out in Japan it was a rare wood, and when it arrived in Japan at the docks, the inspector opened the box and said, "Nope, going back home." So all those certificates had to be sent back to Honolulu. National security. I think for a lot of our products, that's not a particular issue, but there's a term called dual use technology. So if your product can be used both as a common everyday product, but also for warfare, building jet planes or bullets or whatever, that's a dual use technology. And this is heavily controlled here in the US. So you need to sort of be thinking about that. So the mirror image of export is import. So I mentioned Japan a minute ago about the rare woods, but pornographic materials. Around the world, some people like these materials, but they are banned from import back home. So you need to be sure that you're not shipping something that is banned back home. Product labeling requirements. Every country has different product labeling requirements. US is getting more and more labeling requirements. You need to check out the labeling requirements of where you're sending it. Product warning labels. So you need to check out what needs to be done in that country. Clothing chemicals. I don't know if it's still common, but it was common for a number of years. If you're shipping clothing, you don't want it to mildew. So a common chemical they put in it in the shipment is formaldehyde. And a number of countries check the level of formaldehyde in your clothing. And if it's too high, they will destroy your shipment. And again, the certain rare woods, Japan, I talked about earlier. Food products, GMO. In the United States, it's sort of an open debate about GMO. Some people won't buy it, but there's no governmental restriction on GMO products in the United States. Other countries are very different. They have strict restrictions on GMO products. So you need to make sure if you have a food product that it's not going to run afoul of GMO restrictions in whatever country you plan to send it. Ban additives. All kinds of food additives get put into something, and those additives might be banned in the country to which you're shipping. So again, pay attention to your market. Tariffs. Tariffs was a big product a couple of years ago, and it's always been a big product. A great example of a local product in tariffs is Canada. Everybody knows Bubby's mochi ice cream. We all love Bubby's mochi ice cream. The question is it a milk product or is it a rice product? If it's a milk product, it's ice cream, right? If it's a milk product, it's subject to a very steep tariff in Canada. But if it's a rice product, then there's little, if any, tariff on it. So when Bubby started shipping large amounts of Bubby's Mochi ice cream to Canada, they love it just as much as we do. They realized that they had to reduce the tariff cost. So what they did was they changed the ratio of milk to rice in their product, and maybe a little thicker rice on the outside and a little bit less ice cream on the inside, and they're able to avoid a steep tariff, and we're able to sell a lot more ice cream in Canada. Beef jerky. This goes back to the, I'm not sure if I haven't seen anything recently about being in people talking about it, but mad cow disease. The rest of the world was terrified about mad cow disease in the United States. And beef jerky comes from cows, mad or not. So they have restrictions, bans on that. So here's a article about importing beef jerky into Japan. There's also serious issues in China on that. So you need to be careful about that. Curses, how about that? So everybody knows that you're not supposed to remove lava rock from Hawaii Island, because if you do, you'll be cursed. And the Volcanoes National Park every year, every day gets packages in the mail containing lava rock from some tourist who says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take it. My life's been miserable ever since I got back home. Here's the rock, please return it to Pele and apologize for me. So that's a little more on the joking side, but some people take this serious. Health products, CBD oils. It's regulated here in the United States. In the United States, we're a little not quite sure things you can and cannot do, and it's a little unclear. Can you buy CBD in Hawaii and ship it to Kansas? I don't know. There's some concern that CBD oil, because of its connection to cannabis, might be a restricted product. But for Japan, here's to find out the information about Japan, Canada. Also, a lot of people take CBD oil, and Jamie was mentioning earlier, the Hawaii brand is strong. So Hawaii CBD has a special allure to it, and you need to be careful about these products. Here's an interesting one. Hemp gummy bears. Notice these seals of approval. You look at the seal up here. Genuine quality, premium. It's not any kind of seal of approval by anybody. It's just they came up with this nice little seal. Or here, 100% natural. And it makes it look like some government agency has approved this. No, it's just it helps them make the customer feel that it's a safe product. And then, in case you were wondering about the brand, Hawaiian Health. Well, I doubt this product was made in Hawaii. I got a picture of the front of the bottle, but I didn't have a picture of the back of the bottle. I suspect it was made someplace else, and they just brand it as Hawaiian Health for this. Corruption. There are corruption issues all around the world, and there are anti-corruption laws all around the world. So the your distributor at the other end says, hey, if you give me $100 bill, then I'll give it to the customs agent and the stuff will clear customs. No, that's illegal. The U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act says you cannot do that. But that sometimes gets written into contracts. I remember when I was working as a lawyer in China a few years back, I had a client, interesting client. Actually, it was a distributor and a Chinese company, and there was a company in Korea. It was the salesman from Korea was shipping Korean food stuff into China, and the Korean guy spoke a little bit of English, but no Chinese. He'd been going around the world selling the products and stuff, and he'd come up with a really, really simple contract that was pretty much worthless. And the Chinese guy didn't speak any English, didn't speak any Korean. So I was working at a law firm, a Chinese law firm that had the linguistic skills to we had a lawyer, Chinese lawyer who spoke Korean and Chinese, another one who spoke Chinese and English, and between the three of us, we put together a new contract in Chinese and English. And one of the clauses in the contract, I didn't quite understand what it was.
I'm teaching a Zoom class right now, but
what this clause meant. Well, they explained it to me. Oh, this is the bribe money that we have to pay. So we don't want to call it bribe money because we'll get in trouble. So we're going to call it marketing expense or something like that. This corruption thing does come up. And what happens overseas does not stay overseas. So you can get in trouble for that. So wrapping up, the Hawaii brand, as Jamie said, is very strong all around the world, and particularly in Asia. China has, and Japan are crazy about Hawaii stuff. So you have a very strong brand to do. So it's well worth getting into the export market. But do your research. Check out what import controls, export controls, all of these things. Google is a great resource. I found all the URLs in my presentation with just doing a Google search. And one final wrap-up thing is what I teach all of my law students: trust no one. So the guy on the other side, the woman on the other side is going to say, "Oh, trust me. We've been working together. Trust me." No, don't trust anybody. It's a good way to lose money. So I go back to a saying by Ronald Reagan when he was doing the nuclear warhead negotiations with Russia, and they were going to reduce nuclear warheads on both sides. And critics of it said, "Well, how can you trust the Russians? You know them." And the Russians, of course, were saying, "How can we trust the Americans?" Well, what Ronald Reagan said to the American side was, "I don't trust them. That's why we have a very strong verification program. So when this warhead gets dismantled in Russia, we're going to have at least 2 Americans there, one a nuclear scientist and the other one a missile scientist, so that they can verify that this missile and warhead both have been decommissioned." So don't trust anybody, but trust but verify. So be very careful out there. I'm going to stop with that, and I'll leave my slides up for a minute. But let me see if there's any questions. Rob, have any questions come in on chat?
Yeah, there's several questions that have come in, mostly by emailing to me directly and a couple text
Good.
messages. If any of the attendees have a question, please type them into the Q&A. But you had alluded to earlier in the presentation about intellectual property. And for a small company in Hawaii, they're not likely to have patents or this kind of intellectual property, although they might. But what is some of the intellectual property that a company could be worried about from the very beginning, a small company? So trademarks come to mind,
Yes.
logo of the company, and what have you. And we have experience in Hawaii with foreign distributors taking the trademarks or the logos or the taglines of our Hawaii companies and using them locally, and the Hawaii company then losing control of their logo in a certain market. And so how can a company protect itself against something like that? I mean, a logo is a pretty basic fundamental part of the company, right? And the company tagline. So how do you protect yourself?
Well, something like that, your company name, a name of a certain product that some sort of a unique name to it. It is cheap. I'm saying, speaking, hundreds of dollars to get that registered in the United States, and that gives you protection. And so again, an ounce of protection is worth a pound of cure.
So where does that company, say the local company, let's just make up the hypothetical Maui honey company, where do they go? How do they start the process of trademarking and get their logo registered and that sort of thing?
Well, if I remember the Hawaii agency that handles that, I don't think is it DCCA? I can't recall. But you can spend hours on your own try to figure that stuff out. But go to a lawyer, pay him a couple $100 to check the Hawaii database, see if anybody else has claimed that name, and then if not, then you claim it. So you do a little due diligence.
Can a general business attorney do that, or do you specifically need to see an intellectual property attorney?
No. For something like this, a general business attorney would do it. So you come up with a company name. The lawyer, the first thing they'll do is go to DCCA and scan the names in DCCA and see if there's any other Hawaii corporation that has already claimed that name. And that's a very simple thing to do. You just do it from the laptop. The business, any business lawyer will know how to do that.
One of our attendees has typed in the U.S. Patent and Trade Office, and of course that's true as well. I would think that internationally that's a good organization to plug into and see how that works. The other thing I've seen is let's just say hypothetically your website is MauiHoney.com. I hope there isn't a real website like that, but let's just say hypothetically your website is MauiHoney.com. I have seen companies in Japan, Korea, elsewhere, take that domain and localize it to MauiHoney.jp or MauiHoney.kr or what have you. Is there a way to protect against that sort of thing?
Well, you can't stop people from trying to steal from you. So, but you can give yourself some level of protection, and that initial level of protection is get your business name or your domain name registered, so that if someone tries to copycat it or whatever, then you can deal with that. Now that's going to probably require a lawyer, and the lawyer would send a very stern letter to the company in Japan, China, Korea, saying, how dare you, cease and desist, and all of that stuff. That often is all you need to do. But the first step is always registering these things. And there's a international group, World WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, World Intellectual Property Organization. And they're sort of an international clearinghouse for this stuff. So you'd want to probably have your lawyer register with them. That gives you a fair amount of protection as well. It turns out some countries like China does not recognize any registration other than Chinese. So if you're looking at going into the China market, you should probably also contact a Chinese lawyer and have them register your intellectual property there in China.
You had mentioned, again, towards the beginning of the presentation, that your local attorney should know the foreign law of the market that you're getting involved in and the language of the local market. Now, there's a lot of countries in the world and a lot of languages, so you can't expect your local attorney to know all of those laws and all of those languages, but of course, they have partnerships and agreements with attorneys in foreign countries.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So when you're looking for an attorney here locally, do you suggest trying to find one, sort of interviewing that attorney and see if they have partnerships or agreements in place with attorneys in these foreign markets that you're most interested in?
Yes. So several Hawaii law firms are part of a larger international network, and that would be a good thing to do. And let me back up for a minute. If your sales to Japan are $100 a year, well, yeah, maybe it's not worth going through all this effort. But you start getting up to 5,000, 10,000, whatever your threshold is, then you really need to be protecting yourself as you go out. And even if you start off at $100 of sales somewhere, if your marketing plan that you're going to work on later on this next year, if your marketing plan has identified markets, you should check those markets and find a lawyer who can help you protect your intellectual property in those markets.
Now, when a Hawaii company is just starting to think about getting involved in exporting, most of those companies look to Japan first. And we can discuss whether that's smarter or not at another time, but let's just assume a lot of our companies here are thinking about Japan first. Japan is many time zones away, a different language, a different culture away, and there's a lot of room for error in communication and what have you.
Right.
No more so than when trying to find your first distributor or agent or however your means of getting the product into Japan and sold. So I have found that that's the first step of exporting where companies tend to get lawyers involved, is in the drafting and working out of distribution agreements. Do you agree? Or I mean, I think what you're saying is before that, they should work on their trademarking and other things. Maybe that should be their first communication with a lawyer, and then start working on the distribution aspects
Yeah.
of it.
Well, I think those are not necessarily step one, step two. I think they can be done simultaneously. Um, but the language thing is very important, because if you do wind up having some kind of a written agreement between you and the other side, so for example, those two written agreements, do they in fact say the same thing? I've looked at so many dual language contracts between the US and China that were the person on the American side didn't speak Chinese. So the Chinese offered for free to translate the contract into English for them. Two very, very different contracts. So you really need ideally a bilingual lawyer who can look at the two contracts and be sure that they say the same thing.
And a distribution agreement, let's say you find you go to one of let's just follow a very typical path that somebody might enjoin here from Hawaii. They go to one of DBET's Hawaii pavilions in Tokyo at the Tokyo International Gift Show. They find some traction. They see some customers are interested. They get approached by some distributors who say, hey, we would really like to sell your product in Japan. And then you come back to Hawaii and you work with a lawyer to develop a distribution agreement for that for that Japanese company. What, just very generally, what kind of cost do you think we're looking at for a very simple distribution agreement with an attorney like that? Are we in a $1,000 world? Are we in a $10,000 world? What order of magnitude do you think?
I would say in between. If you go to an experienced lawyer who has done distribution agreements, you mentioned earlier, interview your potential lawyer. How many distribution agreements have you written? Well, none. Then you're going to pay that lawyer to learn how to do a distribution agreement. Whereas if you go to one who does it every day, they have a template on their laptop, and it'll be much cheaper for them to come up with a draft. Yeah.
Great. So there's no other questions right now. So with that, I think we will wrap up with Larry. Larry, thanks so much. It's great to see you and have your incredible expertise here. And we hope to see you again as in some part of the HiSTEP 2022 cycle later in the year. But thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thank you for having me as a panelist. Aloha.
Come back here to our general slide. Our next speaker is Kanzo Nara. He's from the I Do Web School. And very briefly, Kanzo-san, I'm going to bring up your website just so we can make sure people see you and how to contact you later. Where are your website? Here we go. Here you are at the I Do Web School. Now, Kanzo Nara is Hawaii's foremost expert on creating bilingual websites and teaching people how to do that, helping people do that. And e-commerce, getting sites ready for selling to overseas clients and customers. He has a particular focus on Japan, but I think the things that he will talk about can be applied to any market that you're interested in. most of our speakers tend to be, and including myself, we tend to speak towards the Japanese market because that's what most Hawaii companies want to aim for. But I hope that you realize you can take the lessons that are learned about Japan and apply them to any market that you're interested in, whether that's Mexico or Belgium or Singapore or what have you. So again, let me bring in Kanzo Nara, and he can begin his presentation.
All right, thank you, Rob-san. Thank you for having me here today and the opportunity. I always find these seminars very educational, so I am always honored to be here as a speaker. So as Rob-san just mentioned, I am a specialist in bilingual web design and IT marketing. I would like to talk about how to get your bilingual website started. Okay. Okay, so we'll be talking about bilingual or multilingual websites and how to get started on that. First, we need to talk about two different things. One is the multilingual website and the other one is a multi-regional website. A multilingual website is basically a website that, for example, it could be a Canadian business with English and French versions on the site. A multi-regional website will be a website that ships both to, like, let's say Canada, United States, and Mexico. So keeping that in mind and where you're exporting to, you want to know where your target audience is and how you want to structure your website. Okay, this is probably the most important section of where to begin, and this is where a lot of my clients tend to run into problems, and they need to come back. They have to come back several years later after they've started. So everybody's familiar with .com websites, and most businesses already have a website, .com, .info, .net, and so on. When you go into international websites and having multilingual websites, you're going to start running into domains like this one, which is .co.jp. This is a corporation for Japan. This is a separate domain that is geo-targeted specifically for that country. And so when you do a Google search will tell the user to go to show this content for this website. Big companies like Toyota uses this because a same Toyota might cost different in Japan or Germany or England or here in the US. So they differentiate their websites by using different countries. The other option that you have here is what's called a subdomain, which is basically whatever you add on top of your main domain. So in this case, it'll be jp.yourdomain. This is kind of like having a mini website within your website. This is another good way to go, and it is less cost effective. Actually, most cases you can do this for free. What I would like to emphasize here is what not to do. And this is, ironically, the method that most of my customers take without consulting an expert is they create a website and they go to website.com/jp. So they make a website within a website. Why this isn't good is when the Google search engines or Yahoo, in the case of Japan, Yahoo, the search engine robot visits your site. It does a robot scroll and it determines what language is used more for your website, and that's the language that becomes dominant for your domain. So you want to differentiate and have a separate domain for your multilingual website. This is the official information that is released by developers.google.com. So this is their official stance on how to do URL structures. It's basically the same info that we just looked at. So the best one is country-specified domain, which is example.jp. The second one is a subdomain, so you tack on that to the top of your main domain. This is also easy to use. This is the most cost-effective one that everybody goes through, but it is user might not recognize geo-targeting from the URL alone, so it's not recommended. Okay, so now once we've determined what domain we're going to use, we're going to start going into design. And what to understand when design is, each country has different trends and different audiences that speak to in a different way. Okay, so we're going to use Japan as an example. And for Japan, we can actually, the design trends kind of are similar to Korea and China, which is it's a lot of heavy content. There's because we use kanji, Chinese characters in Japan, Korea, and Japan, we can add a lot more content than an English character. So, one kanji might have a meaning of like 8 characters in the alphabet. So it's easy to have more content on Japanese sites. So they tend to use more content. Another one they like to use is banner ads. So this is a small ad within a website. A lot of times it's a image or a digital crop up with text added to it. We don't see that very much here in the US anymore. So looking at actual web designs, this is the web design for Pizza Hut here in the US. As you can see, there's only one big image here. It has the order now button, and it has some sub tabs at the top of customization information you have. So
All right,
it's a pretty... Yes.
Kanzo, your slides are not moving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just I only see the title slide, bilingual website.
Oh, okay. Let me try that again then. Okay, are you able to see the slide?
Yeah, I can. It's Saudi Arabia web design.
Okay, let me go back to some of the previous slides then. I think maybe when I make it full screen, it goes away. Are you able to see the full screen?
Yeah, it shows domain URL types.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll quickly go over this then. Okay, so domains, you want to use .com, .co, .jp, or a subdomain here. Okay, just confirming, are you seeing the using local specified URL screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so if you like more detailed information, please visit developers.google.com. They have fantastic resources on what not to do and what to do. Okay, so going back into site design for US and other countries, specifically Asia market like Japan, Korea, and China. Okay, first I'd like to compare the US web design for Pizza Hut. So as mentioned before, it is very straightforward. Start your order, got main picture there, and it has navigational menus at the top. Viewing one more website design, just so we get a contrast of what internationally websites do. Pizza Hut, this is Saudi Arabia, so a very different language, very different market, but yet still very simple website, one general picture, start order here, phone numbers, so on. Okay, now going to the Japanese official Pizza Hut site. There is a whole lot of information happening here. You have a slideshow that's happening here in the middle. This section particularly are the banner ads that I was mentioning before. You have a header navigation and a subheader navigation. You have a sidebar navigation, member registration, and so on. Well, looking at the Japan and Korea market especially, their viewers like to have information spoon-fed to them. So they're not so much in custom building pizza. They want to know what pizza is popular, what pizza is good for this month, and they just want to order whatever's pre-built. So when you're looking at the Japan and Korea market, this is something to focus on. Instead of having a customized product where customers can build their own product and order it, it might be more beneficial to have packaged deals so it's easier for them to order. Marketing for websites in Japan and Korea. First, I would like to look at what the spending amount for shoppers are. This is data from 2020 in US dollars. The average web user spends about $1,800 here in the United States. Close second is United Kingdom. Japan and China is in the top 10 too, and Japan is just around $1,000. So that is a very, very good spending rate for the Japan and China market, internationally speaking. Okay. Types of web marketing are, you can break them down into these three main is pay-per-clicks, SEO, and social media. Pay-per-clicks were constitute of like Google ads, Yahoo ads, Facebook, Instagram, and so on. SEO is natural content, so the more SEO structure you have on your website, friendly code design, also writing a lot of business blogs are a great way to do free advertising for your business. Interestingly, most people discover your product from blogs. So writing a good business blog and having a good schedule is very important. A lot of my clients start off with the best intentions of writing blogs, but they get busy with their operations and tend to cease writing blogs after a few months. So it's important to have this set up and maybe schedule it among your employees to have a good blog writing periodically. Social media, everybody's familiar with this, and we'll go into more detail about this.
So, before you go ahead,
Yes.
I'd just like to make one quick comment that you touched on here that's interesting about Yahoo. A lot of Americans probably haven't thought much about Yahoo in several years, and they really only think about Google. But this is a good lesson because Yahoo is still actually quite popular in the Japanese market. And if you're interested in the Korean market, you really have to look at a company called Naver, Naver, which is, for lack of a better term, it's like the Google of Korea. It's Korea specific. And also you have instant messaging services like Line and other things that are very popular in Japan that are not popular in the US. And so the lesson to learn here is that you need to look at your target market, whether that's Japan or Germany or whatever, and see what is what are the locals using, and don't just assume that it's like it is in the US. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rob-san. Okay, next is like keywords. Keywords, not just in Japanese, but Korean and Chinese. We use a different type of writing system. Specifically for Japanese, we have kanji, hiragana, and katakana. So even if you're saying the same word, there's 3 different ways you can write the exact same word. So, going back to the previous speaker about law contracts in different languages, you want to find a web developer that is can not only speak the language but understand the written language as well. Otherwise, your keywords might not be effective. Here's an example. Even if you can't read, this is a word that means travel. So it's a very big keyword for here in Hawaii. Travel in kanji, which is Chinese characters. Travel in hiragana, which is the elementary phonic alphabet, and katakana, which is the words they use for foreign languages. And if you don't know the combination of this, you could have a lot of good content on your website, but if it's not structured the correct way, you could be missing your huge target audience. Another important part of pay-per-click and search engine marketing in Japan and Korea and China as well is finding out, the time of day when to advertise, location and region. Just like here in the U.S., we have metropolitan areas and also rural areas. So you wanna emphasize where you want to sell. And this is actually interesting because a lot of my clients, they like to advertise in big cities because, you want to go after the larger population. But in fact, the larger metropolitan areas already have stores they can walk to or take the train to and visit it. But the rural areas actually have a larger population with less stores. So online-wise, they spend more money shopping. So you should consult a specialist and figure out where you want to spend your money when you're advertising for your website. Other one is obviously gender, age. If you're using a platform like Facebook or Instagram, you can find out the income level of your audience. This is particularly good for real estate agents here in Hawaii because we can select income-based advertising for people who might be in the market for real estate. Also, LPO's landing page optimization. One good news for Japan and Korea is their internet is a lot faster than us, so you don't have to worry too much about landing page optimization and load time. They have very fast internet. Okay, this is going to be tapping into what Rob-san was just asking in a little more detail. So this is a social media globally versus Japan for 2020. So as Rob-san mentioned, Naver, which is a platform that is one of the platforms that they run is an application called Line. They have 80 million users, and this is one of the largest apps in Japan. If you compare that to the number one in global trend, it's Facebook. Instagram globally is number 5. Facebook Messenger is number 3 internationally. But if you compare that to Japan, it's totally different. You have number 2 comes up Twitter. Number 3 is Instagram. Number 5 is TikTok. Globally, TikTok isn't even on here. So when you're looking to do a social media campaign, and there's so many platforms out there, and you have limited funds and limited resources, meaning your staff that will actually be maintaining it, you really want to focus, really want to do your research and find out what social media platform to go into. This can even get more broken down into, for example, for Japan, number 1 Line is popular for people above 15 up to 45, but then after that, the numbers drop down. Facebook, the numbers increase for demographics over the age of 45. But younger ones, they do Instagram. So even in your age group will change what platform does to use. And here is probably the most important part is 83% of all preliminary searches are done on your smartphone. So if your website doesn't look good on a smartphone, it doesn't load fast on a smartphone, you're missing out on 83% of potential new visitors. Just for reference, second viewers are 51% PC. So what happens is they do their preliminary search on their phone. If they're interested, they'll do a PC search the second time. And then when they find, they'll read more into your website. This is going back to the marketing portion of like when and where people are searching for your website. And the biggest part probably in Japan and Korea and probably metropolitan areas in China too is in transit. So people commute a lot, especially in metropolitan areas on train. They spend the average of 45 to 90 minutes one way to go to work. And what they do during this time is look at their smartphones. Second one is lunch. And why I skipped to lunch is, unlike here in the US, a lot of companies in Japan and Korea, they're very strict about web browsing on private material during work time. So they're not very keen on people searching for stuff. So, and the third one is evening time. This is where the second search comes in. So you looked for it early in the morning when you were going to work, you liked it, you remembered it, you bookmarked it during lunchtime, and now in the evening, you'd like to find out more about it. You open up your PC and do a secondary search. This is where you can really show off more information, but it's important to do the eye-catching attention grabber in the transit section. So this is the eye-grabbing section, which is creating a landing page optimization. And you know, you probably heard of this terminology quite often recently, but landing page and optimization should be done on every page of your website. It's not just a couple of pages you want to emphasize on. You want this for everything, like especially like your contact form page or your checkout section should be really optimized for good viewing. A couple of the rules for landing page optimization is a 2-second rule. So if you click on a link from Google, if it doesn't show up the information you want to have in 2 seconds, their attention span is gone already and they're going to go to a new site. The information should be within 2 swipes. So you shouldn't show too much information, but there's ways to optimize your information, which is everybody's visited Wikipedia on your smartphone. What Wikipedia does is very smart. Instead of showing entire bulks of paragraph, they minimize it using what's called accordion content. It's where the content is mushed together. Unless you click on it, it doesn't pop up. This is a very good feature to have on your website if you have content-heavy resources. especially when you probably have a shopping cart like products, you have product dimensions, material, and so on. You want to optimize these information. Visual effects at top, you want this to be simple but decisive. So you don't want to get over greedy, and the trend in the past couple of years has been the cease of using slideshows. I know this was very popular with my clients because they have very good pictures. They want to show all dimensions of the product. But when you do this on a smartphone, the slideshow takes time to load. So you want to focus on one image, maybe have the slideshow more below at the bottom of your page. Your message of the product and the information should be very decisive and easy to find. So instead of going into the history of the product, what came of it, what's good of it, all the merits of the product, you want to have the good general bulk of the information at the top. For people who want to do more research, you want to bring that to the bottom again. In conclusion, your customers are very busy and they have short attention spans. So you want to be able to grab their attention, keep it, and have them remember it. So when they want to buy it, they can read more about you. Some future e-commerce aspects to be looking at, what we can expect now. Fulfillment centers are very big now. For those of you who already have Amazon Prime accounts here in the US as a merchant, the fulfillment centers are doing excellent here in the US, and they're probably going to further expand in the future. Internationally, you want to have currency converters. Other things that can help your business is there's a lot of business admins apps out there. There's hundreds. There's so many to cover, but it's good to research what might help your business, and we will go into more detail with that in the next page. So fulfillment centers. When we were talking about this for, like, let's say Japan, Japan does have Amazon Prime, and they do have Rakuten. But the downside of that is you have to be a corporation or a business registered in Japan to have fulfillment centers with them. But, oh, I'm sorry, Rob-san, can I ask a question? I think you had a speaker a few months back that handled Amazon Prime fulfillments.
Yes, and Rakuten.
Okay, yeah. So there are vendors and businesses who do internationally. They basically represent your company for your Rakuten on Amazon. So that's a good way to contact those types of companies. Another big one is currency converter. I know, here in the US, we like to think the almighty dollar is the best way to go. And it is, it is the best currency that people like to base their monetary value on. But it's friendly for the user to see how much their product actually is in their currency. There are some modules and systems you can use to convert your website to have a local currency, and it is user-friendly. The only thing you want to be careful is everybody's going to be using a credit card when processing online. Depending on your credit card company, the credit card processing will get delayed 24 to 48 hours until it actually shows up as a transaction. So your currency converter should have a notation on your website saying that, this is currency as of, December 9th, 12 p.m. Your actual currency might change a little bit, so please contact your credit card company and so on. But it's nice to have on there, especially when your product might be over $100 and starts getting more expensive. Okay, this is almost a must when you have a multilingual site, is language support. So you want to have, bilingual staff, bilingual website, dedicated URL, extensive FAQs. Interesting thing about the Japanese and Korean market is they're very good at asking questions. And if you have a contact form, they will contact you. They'll actually contact you through social media too, because they know that the public is viewing you. And if you don't respond, it'll look bad for you. So they want to have you respond. And a lot of times they're just asking very simple questions like, do you have this in extra small? Things like that. But one of the ways to expedite this is to have a good FAQ section in that language for your website. Another good feature that's popular for Korea, Japan, and China is a line chat feature. You can have a line chat feature. It's almost like a chat bot. You can turn it on your website, and people can ask questions directly from Line.
Anzo,
Yes.
the issues you're bringing up are extremely important, and I hope that our audience is understanding that they will need somebody in their company to
Huh?
be able to answer these questions in Japanese or whatever
Yes.
language is coming in, right?
Yes.
Especially in Japan, I think in Korea, China, you cannot expect your customers to be able to communicate clearly with you in English. And if you're going to have a Japanese website, which you should have if you're interested in the Japanese market, then it's reasonable to expect that your customers are going to communicate with you through that website in Japanese. And so you need to be able to communicate back to them in Japanese, and do not rely on Google Translate or any of the other translation services, because that just does not work as well as maybe you think it should. And you really need a native speaker or writer part-time on your staff to be able to respond to these questions and queries that you will get. Anyway, please continue.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Robson. Yeah, it's very difficult, especially this day in social media for that, because people expect instant responses. And one of the reasons users use the social media to ask question is they want to pressure the vendor to respond to them quickly because they want quick information. And if that post goes unanswered for several days, they lose interest in the product. Not only that, but when a new person comes to view that, picture on Instagram or a post on Facebook, if they see it not replied, they get a bad impression of your business. So it's very important to respond quickly, but it's hard because, not everybody is bilingual or trilingual in Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. So this is something you should consider before just going full out social media in a bunch of languages. You should
And
be
I'm
prepared.
going to ask a question ahead of the Q&A function. Do you know of any services in Japan or even here locally that can manage this kind of activity for a local Hawaii company? Like they could, so the problem is if you do this from Japan, if your customers are in Japan and you have your staff here in Hawaii, let's say it's a Japanese staff that can type Japanese very clearly and perfectly, you're offset by 19 hours from Japan here, right? So somebody in Japan might be sending you a message, but it's the middle of the night Hawaii time, and you don't respond quickly as customers expecting.
Yes.
So are there services in Japan who could manage this for a Hawaii company?
Very good question. Actually, I have a few sister companies that I work with in Japan. This is something our company is trying to do too. But unfortunately, the short answer is there is not. There's companies in Japan who cater this service to Japanese companies. There's U.S. companies who cater this to U.S. companies. But internationally speaking, it's very hard to do.
Oh, there's a good business there then.
Yeah, it is a good business, but there's a lot of digital infrastructure that you have to consider: the time differences, the language support, and also the support staff. They understand the social media platform, but they actually don't understand your physical product. So if it gets to be a technical question, the bilingual staff needs to check with somebody within the company to see if they're answering it correctly. So there's a time lag that happens there too. So a lot of the IT companies have been unable to really fulfill this service need for the logistical reasons. Yeah, but excellent question. Excellent question. Okay. Some web and IT trends to be looking forward to 2022. 2022, we are expecting similar web trends as of 2021, especially because the pandemic state is still ongoing. One fact that you should keep in mind is before the pandemic and after the pandemic, the biggest difference is the average web user prior to the pandemic was about 3.5 hours per day. Now it's up to 8.2 hours a day. So people are viewing content much more on your website. What this means is you can have more multimedia experiences for your users. So you can have more video content, you can have more 3D virtual tours, you can increase your text content, augmented reality, captivating questionnaires. You can have a lot more things that your users can interact with compared to 2 years ago. This is an important part that I always emphasize to my customers is you want to be able to have them complete their transaction. A lot of times we see here in Hawaii is you go to a website and you want to do something and it says, give us a call or download this PDF. That's my least favorite one is when you end up at a PDF. You do not want that to happen with your user, with your customer, because they want to complete their transaction. They want to buy your product or your service from you. They want to get it done now. A few things to keep that in mind is before you start, making your website, you want to create a good transaction flow of what you expect your client to do and what is a completed stage of transaction. Define a good target goal. Appointment reservation systems. This is very big for service type industries. Instead of saying just contact us, you can actually have them book an appointment time with you. Online payment options. Try to offer more options for you. I don't know if people are familiar, but a lot of people do have Amazon Prime accounts. Amazon Prime offers an option where you can embed a payment option within websites that you can pay with Amazon Prime. There's a lot of interesting payment options out there that you should try to tap into if you can. Another thing is like reminders for text and email. So, once people do things, they make an appointment. I know this is good with Zoom these days. People RSVP to a Zoom event. It sends you reminders. This is something you want to do for your business as well. Design and trends for 2022 include things like scrollytelling. What this is a long web page, like telling a story. So instead of having people jump to page to find information, you want to have a long scrollytelling. But this is a catch-22 when you're considering LPO. So you want to be careful what you're doing here. Less colors and design. This is because people using smartphones, you don't see background images anymore like you used to do. 10 years ago, actually more than 10 years ago, here in Hawaii, a lot of the popular web designs included things like hibiscuses or plumeria or ocean waves in the background. You can incorporate that into your design today, but when they visit your website on a smartphone, it won't show up. So colorless design is very popular now. Parallax animation, this is just having more interactive animation on your website so people don't get bored when they're scrolling your site. So after 2 swipes, you have an image that kind of moves with your finger, things like this. Video marketing. This has been a big boost in the past 2 years, especially YouTube. You cannot go a day without watching YouTube and probably not, 5 minutes without seeing an ad pop up on YouTube. So it is a great place to advertise. You can localize this very specifically. So like mentioned before, it can be localized for metropolitan areas or rural areas in Japan, internationally anywhere, and you can start it quite reasonably with a $10 budget a day.
Kanzo, I'm very sorry,
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you again,
Sure,
but
sure.
I think not only should our Hawaii companies be advertising on YouTube, but they should be making YouTube videos or videos for their website, because I think, as Jamie had mentioned and other people have mentioned throughout the day, that the Hawaii brand, the Aloha brand, is so strong with the blue skies and the palm trees and the breeze and the water and the beach, and all of these things are colorful and fantastic images. And I think that videos, short videos, can go a long way across multiple languages. Words are not necessary in some cases to promote your product, and we need to get our companies doing more of that, making very nice short videos to get out to the world through their website, through their social media, but obviously YouTube and and the Chinese version of Weibo and others are great resources out there, and it's essentially free. So again, I apologize for interrupting, but these are just things that I really believe in.
No, that's a very good point. Thank you. Yeah, as Robson mentioned, and also going back a couple of slides, I was mentioning things about people's attention spans. And you might have a couple paragraphs on the information, but it might be more effective to embed a video within that page describing the product that's maybe 90 seconds or 2 minutes long. The added benefit of this is a lot of people are switching from reading to watching. So when they go to a product page, instead of seeing 2, 3, 4 paragraphs of information regarding the product, it might be a smart idea to have a short video of what that product is, show all dimensions of it, and have somebody explain how it was made, where the factory is, and so on. And the people click on it. So, it goes back to the 2-second rule again. They see all the information they want to see. They see a video at the bottom, they're probably going to click it. So it's a good way to market on YouTube and then also embed that video into your website. So it's kind of a win-win situation if you do this. Lastly, this is YouTube is the fastest growing demographic right now, is actually people above 50. So baby boomers and Gen X who weren't really watching YouTube back in 2019 are watching it now in huge numbers. Reasons they're watching is to embrace nostalgia. So they're watching, old videos from the 80s and 70s. I'm not sure how people find these videos and post it to YouTube, but they're very entertaining and people like watching it. People are not so much, sitting down for the 7 o'clock news anymore, as they want to visit, watch specific news for them. So they want to stay in the know using YouTube. And another big one is how to. People like to see, instead of reading a PDF of instructions on how to build something, they want to see a 3-minute video on how to make whatever they have in their kitchen or their new toy that they just bought. So it is a huge demographic for YouTube right now. That concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank Rob-san, DV8, HiSTEP, and SBA for organizing this event today.
Great, Konzo, thanks again. I highly encourage any of our attendees who are interested in having a bilingual website or trilingual or what have you, please contact Konzo and get his advice on this. I'm going to very briefly bring up your website again so people have your contact information. Everything here is current 808-343-4040 and info at I Do Web School. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my I Do Web School, but for my bilingual website, let me send you a different website.
Okay.
Yes, I just sent it to the chat room. This is our English website for bilingual web design.
Let me bring that up real quick.
Yes.
Great. Well, here you can, I haven't looked at this site in a couple of months, but here you can see obviously just very short videos, and there's the Sakura. These are very fast loading videos. No problem.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. They're they're almost GIFs, but they're very light, so it doesn't take up too much server time.
Okay, great. And your contact information is the telephone numbers here, and everything's
Robson,
great.
if you could click on the About Us section real quick for me, please.
Sure.
Yes, if you go there and go to Contact Us, this is something I'd like to show an example of when making your website. Is if you go here, it's not just a contact form. So we have 4 different ways you can contact us. You can call us, you can schedule an appointment, you can go to a form. So you want to do this with your customers as well. And instead of just saying contact us, you want to give them options of how they can contact you.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Let's see. One of our attendees has an idea or it has a website that they'd like you to look at. You can see that in the chat. And later you can give them some feedback directly. I'll connect you to by email.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks again. Our next speaker, I consider him the godfather of shipping in Hawaii, is Brian Suzuki. He's the president of Hawaii Air Cargo, and has a tremendous amount of experience, many years of sending product internationally, particularly by air, and to Japan, but of course elsewhere. And so, Brian, could you tell us about Hawaii Air Cargo and then give us some insights onto shipping product? Because attendees, I really hope you pay attention to the logistics part of this conversation today. It's my experience that our local companies do not think about logistics until it's too late. And they get involved in the logistics conversation after the order's done, the product's ready, and then they think, well, I'll just call FedEx, UPS, the post office, and I'll ship this product. And that's really not the way you want to do things, because your logistics can cause you to lose a lot of money on what would otherwise be a nice, profitable project for you. And how you can lose money is having the wrong packaging, having customs duties that you didn't anticipate, having all kinds of storage issues. So for example, if your product needs to ship in air-conditioned units, it could be chocolate, it could be some other kind of cream-based product or what have you that would melt otherwise. And you need to get somebody like Brian Suzuki involved way before the shipment so he can advise you on all of these topics. And by getting him involved in the beginning, you will save yourself a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and money later. So with that, I'll stop, and I will introduce Brian again. So Brian, please, thank you.
Hi, good morning. Can you all hear me? Rob, can you hear me? Is it still? Oh, I'm not hearing you again. I get cut off from you. For some reason, wait, I'm not catching you. Can you hear me now? Oh, I still can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, because
Okay,
I was
now.
muted.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, now I can hear you. But and you can hear me then.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, if you'll go on to my presentation, we can connect you to that. Appreciate that. But while I'm doing that, Hawaii Air Cargo is an air freight forwarder. And basically, we do the same thing as an airline, but we don't have airplanes. And what we do is we do a lot of consolidation. And our biggest market actually is from the mainland to Hawaii. But we're one of the larger exporters, especially to Japan. And this year, because of the pandemic and the cutback of flight schedules, we really have a hard press. Prior to the pandemic, we had 21 daily flights to Japan alone from Hawaii, different airports, of course, but like Kona and Honolulu. But we were servicing 21 daily flights. Today, we have maybe 3 daily flights. So it's a big difference. But nonetheless, you have to remember, if nothing else, the aircraft or the airline industry is not regulated. It's kind of ominous sounding, but in other words, it's a buyer beware market. So you have to pretty much make sure that you're familiar with what everybody's talking about. And when you ask for quotes, we're talking about the same thing so that you're not confused with kilos or pounds or yen or US dollars. That's very important. And so anyway, I'm going to give you a brief background on this. We, in the middle of the island or middle of the Pacific, an island in the middle of the Pacific, we have just air and ocean. Unfortunately for the ocean side, we don't have much exports. So we don't have all these big carriers coming through Honolulu going to Asia. What happens is that most of the big carriers, they only take container loads, but we don't have enough exports to fill containers. On the other hand, air cargo has been good for us, mainly because uh, the fact that we have, big airplanes coming in. By the way, the 3 daily flights coming in from Japan with ANA, JAL, and Hawaiian Airlines, they don't have many passengers on board, but the cargo load is full coming this way. Going back to Asia, there's very little cargo going out, and of course, very little passengers, but they're stationed or they have to go back to Asia to bring back more cargo. Once it comes to Honolulu, it normally doesn't stay here. The majority goes from here, connects to domestic flights to Chicago, New York, Houston, etc., any place on the mainland, because the trans-Pacific flights are pretty full right now with cargo. So because of the fact that we have little cargo going back to Asia, the airlines are always looking for any kind of revenue to put on the aircraft. And therefore, they're very competitive with rates going to Asia. Just to let you know too, going to Asia, going to Tokyo, specifically, or Osaka, the major destinations, the price that we get from the carriers actually is cheaper than going from Honolulu to San Francisco or Los Angeles. It's hard to believe. And then it's hard for you as an exporter to sell your customers because they say that, wow, it's a 9-hour flight to Japan. It must be expensive. But actually, the cost of air freight from, say, Tokyo to Honolulu is triple the cost of from Honolulu to Japan, to Tokyo. And that's the hardest thing to have someone in Japan or buyer in Japan understand. And, we've had customers, or we have customers that they don't want us to tell their competitors that they're buying directly from Hawaii because they experience the better rates. And because of that, they can take advantage of that. As a matter of fact, this year, 2021, we've doubled our pre-pandemic volume of cargo going to Tokyo. Even with the fewer flights, we've been able to ship a lot of stuff. The tourists are not coming. The Japanese tourists are not coming in to buy products. So they still miss it. So we ship the products to stores in Japan and they're buying it there, or they're buying through their internet, companies that have supplies from Hawaii shipped there. So anyway, things to see. This is a slide of cargo shipped in the baggage compartment of a passenger flight. We do a lot of that, and they're in containers. This is a view of what's underneath the passenger deck. And this is a freighter. We bring in stuff from the mainland using all freighter, no passenger aircraft. We don't have the luxury of doing that from here to Asia, though. But the volume is still from the mainland to Hawaii. As a matter of fact, there is a backlog being the holiday season. A lot of freights coming in from the mainland. And even with this type of aircraft, we still can't get everything shipped every day. There's a backlog on the West Coast. Postal Service also is a big shipper. And actually, I just brought this up because people forget that they do have a service. especially with their flat rate boxes going to the mainland. They do have special rates to Asia as well. So look into these types of services. Okay, one thing to understand, I mentioned to you how rates from here to Japan is a third of what it costs from Japan to Hawaii. It's directional. Even from here to LA versus LA to Honolulu, the rates are different. And rates are charged by actual or dimensional weight. And basically, dimensional weight is a formula used to figure out what a cubic foot of, say, cargo is going to cost. If you have something very light, you're still going to have to pay for the space that it takes up. And this is very important, the dimensional weight, because different carriers use different formulas. For instance, the domestic normal between US airports is length times width times height in inches divided by 194. International, you divide by 166. That's the industry standard. But there are a lot of freight forwarders and actually FedEx and UPS use 139. So you can see 139 goes into any number more often than 166. Okay, and don't forget the pounds per kilogram. There might be some specific commodity rates. They're going by the wayside because we don't have a whole lot of, say, we used to have a chocolate candy rate to Asia. They're not shipping as much anymore. They also have contract rates and spot rates. But don't forget what spot rates are. If you tell the airlines, I'm going to ship for the foot forwarder, I want a special rate for X amount of pounds of freight, and it's a large amount, and they might give you a discount on that particular shipment. Or if you say that I'm going to ship weekly or every 2 weeks, they might give you a special rate because of the frequency. And don't forget to add the fuel security and screening surcharges. Okay, this is just a visual of how they we figured that out. So you can see the difference. And again, 166 for the usual, 139 for some of these other people. And it's a hidden rate surcharge. Okay, some of the other documents and charges that some people, they charge for an export declaration is required by customs, but only if the value is over $2,400. Also, some people charge to help you with your invoice or impacting this. There are a lot of different things that can be added on. Food safety analysis is always required. Phytosanitary inspection for plant material. The other things that hazardous or hazard analysis critical control point HACCP. Basically, it's a form that if you're shipping regularly and it's food stuff, you have to show through this analysis how every step of the way the product is being taken care of. For instance, if you're shipping fresh fish, from the time it's caught, how does the ship that catches it, puts it on ice, what temperature, everything is set up so that when they land and they have to take it to the auction house, all the temperatures and the control points has to be set up that a receiving country like Japan will watch for that kind of stuff. And they look at what point it could actually be detrimental if they're not watching it very carefully. So at the same token, when we import stuff from Japan, a lot of the importers require the shipper to get a HACCP form, and it's screened. But sometimes for some products that are manufactured, it might be detrimental because it shows you all the steps that that manufacturer did to produce your product, whether it's baked, roasted, or whatever that needs to be done to the product. It shows, and of course, not anybody can get a handle or a HACCP form readily. It is controlled by customs and by the food control group. Also, don't forget security screening. We have to make sure. That's why my company, Hawaii Air Cargo, we don't advertise because it's very difficult to make every individual a known shipper. Okay, we have to do background checks on every shipper. So normally we don't do small packages. The difference is when you have FedEx, UPS, and they take anybody's things, they put it on their own aircraft, and it's a freighter. And basically, there are no passengers. Therefore, they go under a different regulation. They're not as critical on the inspection or security screening. And whereas a lot of times going to Asia, we put our products on a passenger flight. And with the passenger, it is very strict. We not only have to check the background of our shippers, we have to check when we receive it, the product, the boxes look legitimate. We have to go through an x-ray machine, or a dog has to sniff it, and or we have to open it. Different ways of checking to make sure there are no dangerous goods, bombs, or anything like that in that package. Okay, and the last one says CITES. Those are just what we call is a treaty of certain products. For instance, if you want to export black coral is a endangered species, so black and pink coral. Therefore, you have that CITES certificate that say where you harvested it at, all kinds of information on where it was, and without that, the country will not, Japan will not import it, will let you send it there. This is something that Professor told us earlier about learning about these Incoterms. Basically, it's so that you're protected at what point do you turn over the liability to your buyer. So this is important. Other things that require delivery dates, because some rates can be specific. For instance, somebody wants it on the very next flight. Now, because of security, we cannot tell the customer what is the next flight. Just that they're not putting something on the last minute. So that, but to get it on the first available flight, you have to pay say a priority rate. Some standard rates are 2 to 3 days, and deferred maybe 3 to 5 days. They have all kinds of things like UPS, FedEx has ground service, and somebody's next to air does not mean that it's going to go to the destination next day. Some companies use next day air for 3 to 5 day service to Hawaii. Next day air might be on the continental US, but to Hawaii, it's a 3 to 5 day service. So you got to be aware of what terminology is being told to you or quoted to you. Selecting your carrier. Some people are specialists in special commodity, perishable shipments, that kind of stuff. Some are destination specialists. They're very good at shipping things to certain countries. And some people are small package specialists. For instance, FedEx, UPS, and the post office. But again, shop around because air freight is not regulated. The shipper is ultimately responsible for any shipping deficiencies. Okay, for instance, Hawaii Air Cargo, we ship a lot of chocolate candy or cookies and candies even today to Japan, and we've had some bad times. You know, years ago when we first started, we were using whatever carrier would give us a good rate, but some carriers, I won't mention names, but we ship a container load, air container load going to say Tokyo. And what happened was that that carrier had a contract with the ramp service, the people that take the cargo from the cargo department out to plainside. And this particular carrier, their requirement is all freight going out to say on the Tokyo flight has to be picked up and taken out to the gatehouse 2 hours prior. And now that plane is coming in from, say, Los Angeles to San Francisco and then going on to Tokyo. But then the flight's not even there. And you know how hot it gets at the airport on the tarmac. You know, it might be in the mid 80s, but it might be 100 degrees out on the ramp. So we've had instances where the shipment got melted down, the chocolate shipment. And once it gets heat damage, you folks have seen chocolate that has like a gray cover, looks like it's mold. it's edible, but it doesn't look edible. So we get a lot of rejection. So we had a problem with this one carrier because they took it out early, and I reminded that carrier, don't take out our container until the flight is in and they're ready to load it. And it took that cut down. Now the shipper has a contract with me or a freight forwarder or the airline. But airlines, they'll just come back and say, the package, your product was not properly packaged. Well, you put it in a container that doesn't have refrigeration. They have refrigerating containers for air, but it costs like $400 extra just to ship a container to rent that particular refrigerated container. So, something like that to me, the carrier can, I would say, easily look at taking it out plain sight when the person on the ramp, say the ramp supervisor calls us, okay, we're ready to load the Tokyo flight. Bring the cargo that's perishable out right now. And they bring it out and it's out on the cart, maybe 10 minutes at the most. But rather than sitting on the tarmac for so long, it's actually kept cool. They could insulate the container by putting I guess, a blanket, a foil blanket on top to reflect the heat. So anyway, there's a lot of things that can be done. So you should find somebody that's used to shipping certain products. And but again, it's not regulated, so you can't. Now we had to pay the claim because the contract was between this candy company and my company, and that's the contract. And then we did not take enough care, even though it was the carrier's fault. The carrier's not paying the claim, but I had to pay the claim. Okay, so that's important to make sure that when you do ship something perishable, that you get that kind of, I guess, responsible nature of that particular company. Okay, but again, this is the economics of air and sea container bulk shipping. Full sea containers are best rates. Now, air freight again can be negotiated, and I mentioned because of frequency or volume or the size of the shipment. Sometimes, again, I guess convincing buyers that air shipping may not be expensive. Because when I went to, and again, at the end of this presentation, I'll talk to you about going to all these shows where you should be able to quote the rates, the shipping rates, when you get to this. Well, don't find a potential eager buyer that you had a hard time convincing to buy a product. Then they're worried about the shipping costs. And it did, I've been to, let's say, a show in, say, Fukuoka, Japan, in southern Japan. And we showed a lot of different products. And we had some buyers, especially of cut flowers. And we have cut flowers that, normally we ship in terrariums and such, but we have other exotic flowers that are being exported today. But then these people in Kyushu buys their flower products from Hawaii through the market in Tokyo. The market in Tokyo would buy in bulk and then sell it to different regions of Japan. And of course, they have to pay not only the rate to fly to Tokyo, but then also the freight rate to get it down to, say, southern Japan from Tokyo. But they were still really worried about what happens when, I try to explain to them the costs. You can get into Kyushu because at that time we had flights to Fukuoka from Hawaii and nonstop. The rates were very good because we had little cargo going down to Fukuoka. So, I tell them, try it, use us. And they had a hard time trying to do that. But, we had some special, rates for them and we showed them samples of the flowers. But what we don't have, our Hawaii sellers, product sellers, they don't go out and wine and dine people. Like in Japan, the nature is such that a salesman from this one flower market in Tokyo, they'll come down to all the buyers in, say, Fukuoka or throughout Japan, and they'll take them out to $1,000 dinner or something for drinks and things like that. And some of the buyers enjoy that. And since we don't do that, they kind of say, well, I don't want to lose my connection with the Tokyo places. So it's a really hard sell for certain products. On the other hand, you have to know what you're going up against. So anyway, going back to the economics of bulk shipment, there are no container air rates to Japan or to Asia, or for that matter, throughout the mainland. There are container rates that we can combine. I had a shipment going to the Middle East, and it was a pretty big size container, and I was able to connect with U.S. domestic carrier to take it to New York, and then from New York on an international carrier, and I was able to get a special rate for which I saved the customer. I think I charged the customer, it was about 5,000 pounds, very, very heavy stuff, but it had a 72 hour window. We had to get it from the time we got it. We have to guarantee it'll be in Bahrain, the Middle East, in 72 hours. So I quoted a rate of $8,000, and the, the company's guy, the shipping guy, said, "What?" And I said, "Should I sharpen my pencil?" Thinking I was high. I said, "No, I got quotes from other companies. And yours is 8,000. The next closest is $32,000." I use that as an example. That's how big a difference it could be. And today, I just did another comparison for a shipment going, let's say, from Los Angeles to Honolulu for a bulky shipment, 2 pallets of very light material. And the 2 containers weighed only about 450 pounds. Now, I use different carriers. I call the airlines, I call different forwarders, I call FedEx, UPS, and the rates for that thing, it dimensionalized. The dimensional chargeable weight was high. So the lowest rate was about $1,400, but the highest rate, would you believe, was $9,000. And that was both on FedEx and UPS because they use that 139 dimensional weight factor. So I'm saying that you have to shop around and know what you're asking for. And something like this is important because you got to sell it to your customer, say in Japan, that it's not expensive to ship by air. And how do you explain that? Well, we have a lot of empty cargo space on the flights going back to Japan from Hawaii. Therefore, the airlines want the business, and therefore they're bringing the price down. And believe it or not, it makes a big difference. Like I say, people that buy today tell us, don't tell, well, we're shipping a special commodity to Nagoya, and that customer was buying a lot of stuff from Hawaii. And then that, when I went to visit him, the guy says, "Don't tell my competitors I'm buying from Hawaii." I'm going, who are your competitors? I want to go visit them. But the point is that you are, you have to try not only the product, you do a lot of work for your product. Everything goes into it, packaging, various things that needs to be done. And you finally got a buyer that's interested. You don't want that person to be turned off by the distance and the freight pricing. So this is just a show of some of the products that we're shipping and product plans. And this is how we have to wrap them individually. We have to have the state inspector and the federal inspector check it all out for any bugs. And this is the inspection site in Japan. This is in Tokyo. We had a big contingency, and they go through the plants. These are Japanese inspectors very carefully. They actually even shake it on a stainless steel table and make sure no eggs are alive. And these are products. I'm just going to show, it's important what Jamie said about going to these trade shows. You can see what products you're up against. And don't forget, this was in China. And of course, the handouts had to be all in their language. So it had to be Chinese. Mr. Arkaki from Owen Candies and Nuts hired interpreters, people there. They even brought the moo-moos for them to wear, but they were bilingual interpreters to help sell his products. And again, has to be in their language. This is the Hawaii pavilion in Beijing. Hawaiian host, Hawaiian sun, and all kinds. This is the I just want to tell you this small story, but when you go to these trade shows or if you have samples, you have to remember that you have to follow regulations. And a lot of the trade shows are held in a what they call foreign trade zone, meaning that you're not actually entered into that country. And this is at a special convention hall that was considered part of the foreign trade zone. But this company, they call the French Gourmet. They made frozen dough, and my company was shipping it throughout different Asian markets to actually bakeries and also to the mainland in smaller quantities. But what happened was that when they went to the show, they brought or they asked me to reship. And by the way, we shipped a lot of products that DBED or the state of Hawaii paid our bill, and so we shipped it there. And now they made arrangements for the adjoining hotel to bake it. And on the Sunday, the Monday was opening, but Sunday I was taking our hand truck a load of frozen dough to the hotel next door, but we were stopped right at the door. They said, we can't take this product out. It hasn't cleared through customs. And we were perturbed because we couldn't use the bakery or the ovens in the hotel adjacent. We came back dejected, but when we went to the US Pavilion, which was on the fourth floor of this convention site, I saw a company selling pizza ovens. These are those flat wide ones. And I just happened to ask the people there, they're setting up. I said, can you bake anything? They said, yeah, we can. We need a product to bake and we need propane. We can get the propane there. And so I said, I got the product. Next morning, 7:30, we're there in for 9 o'clock opening. As soon as we entered the convention site on the first floor, the US Pavilion is on the fourth floor. You could smell the aroma of fresh baked pastries all the way down, and your nose will take you right up to the fourth floor. We had so much, we had so much people coming up to the fourth floor, and they would go to the pizza oven guy, and they had to make a portable sign or temporary sign out of the backside of a cardboard with a marking pencil saying, for samples, go to Hawaii booth. And we had thousands of people line up, sticking all around getting samples, not only of that, but candy. We had all kinds of good stuff from Hawaii, juices. And these people became such a big hit, the French Gourmet, that right away, the organizers of this Beijing food and hotel show told them, next year is at Shanghai. We'll give you any place you want. We'll be front and center. It was such a big hit. And it was a 3-day affair that we had in Beijing. But they became an overnight success. The gal on the left, that Chinese gal, she came from Hong Kong, and she was like a manufacturer representative. What happened was that they instructed her, like that, selling point, she would be the contact because of the language. And they grew up overnight. A year later, they became export of the year. Also, they ended up building a new facility, a brand new state-of-the-art facility in Uvalde. And that lasted 5 years because they outgrew that state-of-the-art facility and they had to move to the mainland because one, they're shipping ocean container loads, frozen freezer containers through Asia, and they became a big overnight success story. Unfortunately, we lost the customer because they're shipping a big bulk products. But anyway, just quickly finish up. This is another product that we're exporting out of Kodama Koi Farm in Mililani. This is the Mililani property. They got huge place. Every day, UPS and FedEx from here, they would auction their fish and ship it all around the world. I'll stop here because these are other trade shows that we went to. But again, take advantage of the trade shows and work with them. So,
Brian,
yes.
So can companies that are new to exporting, they're going to hear this term of a freight forwarder.
Yes.
What is a freight forwarder?
A freight forwarder acts as, let's say, an air freight forwarder acts just like an airline. We do everything that airline requires. We are watched over by TSA. We are licensed by the TSA, and to make sure that our house is in order. Everybody from the pickup agent, a driver, has to be certified. We have to make sure that we follow all the protocols or the regulations so that we do not permit or allow dangerous material to get on an airplane. Same token with an ocean forwarder. Ocean forwarder will help you with documentation, doing a lot of different things. We do the same by air, but for international shipments, documentation, filing with proper companies. We have one customer today that ships at least once a month, if not more often, to Europe. And they have to get a special permit from Fish and Wildlife to that because it's a live opie, it's aquarium based things, and he ships it to pet shops throughout not only Asia but throughout Europe. And we have to fly these products from actually originates out of Europe. But anyway, a freight forwarder is just that. We just have to do everything so that when you turn it over to the airlines, they feel safe, and to the point where when we drop off cargo, we have to have a driver and we have to have a lookout, just so that nobody can throw it. If it's a flatbed, especially, no one can throw a possible bomb or potential bomb onto the back of the flatbed going to the airport to drop off at the airlines. And it costs us extra money to go through all these things, but a freight forwarder does all of that. Now, a lot of airlines, you go directly to a Delta, or Delta doesn't fly to Asia, but then a lot of the carriers will try to say they don't want to take the time to go through all these documentation, whatever. So they would say, use a freight forwarder. And from there, yes.
You mentioned during your talk, and others have as well, about Incoterms, and I brought up this for people to get familiar with. If you, as a new exporter, if you're not familiar with this term, Incoterms, it's basically a harmonized global code or rules for shipping. Let's put it that way. And the different terms might be that you'll see very commonly are X Works, which would be EXW, CIF, which is what is it? Cargo insurance and freight, and FOB, which is freight on board. Those are sort of the most common. What, Brian? What is the term that you see the most commonly? CIF.
CIF. Basically, what happens is that to get the best rate, you have to prepay the shipment. Prepay meaning pay it in Hawaii, pay it in the US, not sending it freight collect. Because when you send it freight collect, they will charge the book rate or the highest price that there is. So by sending it prepaid, cost and insurance and freight is included. That way you get the best shipping costs. Okay, and it'll be the responsibility for any damages goes up to the airport of record. Let's say they say Narita Airport or a Kansai Airport, whatever, and they'll say up to that point, once it arrives, it becomes a responsibility of the buyer, the consignee, to receive the shipment, clear customs and agriculture or food and drugs, and that's the rest of theirs. Now, if you have FOB, Honolulu Airport, and they might say, okay, send it to Honolulu Airport, that might be to my company, because we're at the airport too. And after that, it becomes a responsibility of the buyer. Now, we have some buyers, especially in Japan, that they feel that it's better for them to take charge. So the way we do it is it has to be prepaid. So that buyer ships a lot of freight, but he uses his credit card. So when we have something that's ready to go, we send him all the documents and we give him the cost, and he will say, okay, you can charge it to my credit card. And so we get payment, and then the shipment is released to the carrier, and it's on its goes. It gets on a particular flight that we haven't booked on. So prepaid is very important as opposed to freight collect. There are some freight forwarder, let's say Nippon Express, the Japanese companies that may offer prepaid type things, but they have their Japan counterparts collecting the money. I do have some agents there too that work on my behalf that could do that, but it's easier if the price includes shipment to, say, the airport and destination, and we can easily work with the seller, the exporter, as to what it's going to cost, so they can put it into their invoice. So anyway, those are the main thing is, where does your responsibility for that product end, and where the consignee takes over. And that's important, so that in case there's a damage. We had an incident where we had chocolate candies went to Osaka, and the consignee was a big wholesale, actually a distribution network, and they have 7 stories air-conditioned warehouse. And so we had the chocolate go over there, and I got a message back from the seller saying that they got like about 8 boxes, unusual amount, out of 190 boxes. 8 boxes were like, had some heat damage. So I said, how can only 8 boxes get heat damage? It's either the whole pallet or container or whatever. And so what happened was that we replaced it, we shipped the replacement product, got it there, they were happy. Then I was traveling to Osaka a month later, just by chance. So I went to visit the consignee, and I said, I can't imagine only 8 boxes of damage. Basically, when I saw the location of where they're storing it, they had it was the end of an aisle of racks of, products. But then the end of the aisle was, they had a end of the racks, they had a shut aisle so they can run a forklift through. But then it was next to a window. And when I looked at the window, the afternoon sun for about 2 hours would be right on the boxes on the side of that pallet of chocolate candies. So I told the manager who was taking me around, I said, that's where your heat damage were. I bet you the damage, the chocolates that were damaged were on that side of the container. And she had his supervisor for the floor there too. He says, you're right. And he was very apologetic, because he said, we will, it's our fault for putting it in the wrong place. But the point is that they wanted to pay us back for the damages that we ultimately, sent back. But I said, no, it's been taken care of, so don't worry about that. But every place along the line, you have to make sure that the product is taken care of, so that the customer will be happy. And that's why even with live cut flowers, I said, well, if your flowers should be arrived in a bad state, or it was rejected because of bugs, the shipper would be glad to resend another, batch of replacement shipment. But anyway, going back to your question about what the freight forwarder does, that's what the freight forwarder do, as opposed to an airline. Airline really, their big customers are freight forwarders, and so they don't want to take the time, because they have limited amount of, manpower to go through all these details. Whereas we may have the knowledge or the experience to help a shipper. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yes, no, I think that's important. And as I said right before your talk, I think that our local companies do not spend any time thinking about these issues until the very last minute, and they wind up having all kinds of problems and losing money on the logistics part of the project, the sale, and they have a sort of a bitter taste in their mouth about selling internationally. Whereas I think if they contact you ahead of time and discuss what it is their product is and what they need to ship, and you can give them some of your expertise and some budgetary quotes for generally what air freight costs, that it can save people a whole lot of time and money later. Anyway, thank you, Brian. We have to move on to the next group, and we really appreciate you sharing your fantastic expertise with us. So thank you.
Anytime.
And are these numbers correct? This is where people can find you, and at
Yes.
hawaiiaircargo.com.
Right. They can do
Okay.
that. And if they call my office, make sure that, because I'm not always in the office, I'm semi-retired, and that's why I do these classes. But use my cell phone. Let's say it's not on there, my cell phone. But basically, they can call the office and make sure that they pass it on to me right away. Don't have them transfer it to my phone because I'm not there to cover or retrieve the messages on my phone every day. So,
Okay,
yeah, or email me and I'll get the emails every day. Yeah.
great. Okay, thanks again, Brian. It was wonderful.
Okay.
All right, the next speaker is easy to find because that's me. And I'm going to talk about international marketing. And what I'd like to do is, again, we kind of hone in on Japan because, as I said earlier, most of our Hawaii companies tend to look at Japan first. I don't always agree with that. I think that some of our new to exporting companies should be looking at Canada and Mexico for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is we have a free trade agreement in place with those countries. And we generally share more similar language and culture with those countries. And Japan, as a first market to get into, is not the easiest. It's a wonderful market and it can be an extremely successful market, but I just don't think that it's the easiest to jump into if you're new to exporting. Nonetheless, many of our, most of our Hawaii companies are attracted to the Japanese market. And that is the Japan market and Asia in general is where I've spent my 30-year career selling products all over Asia. And I've been based in various Asian countries most of my career until I moved to Hawaii a few years ago. So what my expertise is in sales and marketing and business development throughout Asia. And that's what we'll talk about today. I'd like to say that, again, even though this presentation tends to be Japanese focused, I think you can translate the lessons learned from these experiences into Germany or Brazil or wherever you're interested in selling first. So let's jump in. First of all, when you're talking about Asia, a lot of Americans want to lump Asia into one big market, and that's simply not true. Similarly, I think for Europe, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do South America, Latin America as one big market. It isn't, and you need to sort of pick one and get going in that particular market. Japan is this one, for example, but depending on your product, it could be Korea, it could be Australia, it could be India, what have you. Let's talk about this. I put these two countries in bold here, China and India, because combined, those are nearly 3 billion people, 3 billion potential customers. That's a lot of market. And it's no secret that Asia has been growing in terms of market importance for several years now. But again, some of our key export markets are in Asia. What I recommend is picking just one of these markets to go forward in. As I said, we're looking at Japan today, but it could be any other market. The first thing to start thinking about is that, as we alluded to during the legal conversation, is we have to think about how are we going to get our products to the customers. So you have several ways to do this. You could go direct meaning you actually put somebody, an employee, in the foreign market. So you put them in Tokyo, you put them in Osaka, and they go out and they sell your product. What does that give you? It gives you the most control over the situation because it's actually your employee, or it could actually be you. But it tends to be the most difficult and it tends to be the most expensive, but you absolutely have the most control. Second down that list is an agent, meaning you might hire a company or an individual part-time to work on this for you. They could even be a full-time person, but it's still, you're hiring another company to do it. It costs less money than going direct, but on the other hand, you start to lose control once you bring in that other party. Then probably the most common method of distribution is a distributor. Go figure. A distributor distributes. And that's where the word comes from and why it's such a popular term, because it's sort of in the middle of cost and risk. It's balanced there and tends to be the most common way that companies do this. So a distributor generally buys product from you and then resells it into the market that they're working in. However, there's typically shared marketing costs, meaning you will help them by coming to trade shows and work with them. You might share a marketing budget, these types of things. Next down the list is a reseller, meaning somebody buys product from you and then resells it completely at their own expense, and you're not involved. You don't really know what's going on. You don't necessarily understand what price they're selling it at. You're not involved in their marketing efforts, nothing like that. It's the easiest model for a company to take part in, but you lose control and you have really the least control of that. And another option is you might find that a certain market simply isn't for you, and then you do nothing in that market. And there's nothing wrong with that. At some point, there are some markets where you realize we're just not going to do well here, so let's move on to the next market. Generally, whether you're selling in Japan or whether you're selling in Kansas City, the marketing involves 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. Those should be fairly obvious, but I think that those are fundamental to learning about marketing, and international marketing is no different. There's a couple of things I'd like you to take away from this in terms of selling to Japanese customers for Hawaii-based companies. You have to think about what is the point of sale. There's 2 potential points of sale selling to Japanese customers. The first one is in Japan. That's obvious. But the second one is all the tourists that are coming to Hawaii and visitors from Japan. Now, the past year and a half, almost 2 years, we've had very few tourists, if any, from Japan, but that will come back in 2022. I think I'm quite confident in that sometime later in 2022. And by 2023, 24, and 25, I think things will get back to the air quote normal that we saw up until March of 2020. So it's important to understand these points of sale and how that works. And the language that'll be used in those points of sale, the currency that'll be used, whether it's Japanese yen or US dollars, and where you are contacting those people. In marketing, that's called a touch. How are you touching these people? Is it through a magazine ad? Is it a website? Is it social media? What have you? So there's differences here, and we can certainly talk about those in detail. Let's talk about the product. In Hawaii, you've probably heard of this term omiyage, and loosely translated into English, it's a souvenir, but that really doesn't capture it as well as it could, because omiyage is much more important in the Japanese culture than just saying a souvenir from Hawaii. It's important that the product tell the story of the person's trip to Hawaii. It helps them convey the essence of their trip to the people that they're giving the gift to. And so you'll see in Japanese marketing literature, this concept of omiyage banashi or omiyage hanashi is telling the story of the trip in the product and the packaging of the trip. And secondly, I think it's very important for you to understand, if you're selling to a country like Japan, packaging is extremely important, and you do need a bag to go with that packaging. You can't just hand somebody a box of chocolate, for example, in Japan and have that be the gift. It needs to be wrapped, and it needs to be in a bag. And if you are providing that bag to the customer, you're solving a big problem for them. And it's a good opportunity in that bag to have your business card and your logo on it and your website URL and these kinds of things. So our companies here need to do a much better job of that. This is just a quick example of what the packaging looks like and how important packaging is to the Japanese market, not just for omiyage like this, but if you're buying products in Japan, they will come with fantastic packaging and will have bags that go along with it. I put here, if you see a link in blue, that's actually hyperlinked to a website where you can get more information on any of these topics. Now, back to just fundamental marketing. What you have to very quickly do is segment the market. Meaning, I said earlier that there's 3 billion people combined in India and China. It's a little bit of a misnomer on my part, because not every single one of those 3 billion people are going to be your customers. So let's take Japan, for example. Currently in Japan, there's about 126 million people. Not all 126 million are going to be your customers. Let's go back to the hypothetical Maui honey company. Not all 126 million people in Japan are going to buy that Maui honey. For one, the Maui honey is going to be more expensive in the Japanese market than honey that could be made in Japan, or honey that could be made in Brazil or Argentina and brought into the Japanese market. So automatically you're competing on price, you're competing on many other things. And what you need to start to figure out is who is really your niche market segment for that Maui honey. And when you look at 126 million people, you will probably figure out fairly quickly that only about 1 million of those people are your potential customers. And what you need to do is find out as much as you possibly can about that segment. And why is that your niche market? And then what is the spending habits of that niche market segment? How much money do they have to spend? How educated are they? Where do they live? These types of things. And that's where lots of market research can come into that. But you can figure a lot of this out very quickly on your own, just by the types of people that are buying the product. You'll see a trend over time. And then what you have to be able to do is address all of your marketing messaging to that target market segment. and forget about the rest of the market. So let's just say, again, hypothetically, that only 1 million people in Japan are your customers. You will pretty quickly be able to figure out that of those 1 million people, there's a certain percentage that are female or male, and there's a certain percentage that are over or under a certain age, that make a certain amount of money, what have you. And then your marketing messaging has to be to that segment only, and just worry about those few 100,000 people that are your potential customers, and don't worry about the other ones. That's a very hard thing for new marketers to accept, that they are ignoring the bulk of the potential market. But in the end, when you're able to target your messaging to a certain segment, whether it's young or old or male or female or what have you, your imaging, your words, everything starts to make sense, and your marketing communication feels like it's singing this song that that your target market segment wants to hear. Let's leave it at that and move on. So let's just very briefly learn about some of the demographics in Japan. I think that our Hawaii companies can do really well, specifically in sort of types like, say, organic or natural types of products. Certainly products that are geared towards older people. It's no secret that Japan is an aging society. There's over 110,000 people that are over 100 years old. That's quite remarkable, really. And so products that we have in Hawaii that might be aimed at that type of lifestyle, quality of life, that's what that's called in Japan, QOL. The other thing that some of our other speakers have alluded to is really marketing towards the aloha-ness. Maybe we just made a new word there, but getting Hawaii front and center in your marketing is extremely important. The sunshine, the water, the wind, the breeze, the beach, all of that. The colors, the wonderful colors are really a great way to get your products out there. Sorry, let me move to the next slide here. So I bring this up just because looking at the demographics in Tokyo, or in Japan, for example, Tokyo is roughly 27 million people. That's really quite remarkable. I mean, it's something like 18 times the whole size of Hawaii. But I also show some other cities here that I thought were roughly the size of Hawaii. These are just, one city, right? So these mega cities offer an interesting opportunity for the marketer to target some of these markets through print advertising, through Facebook ads, and as Kanzo Nara had alluded to earlier. There's another thing about the Japanese culture that might be quite different, say, than Hawaii, in that a lot of your potential customers, say in Tokyo, you can imagine they're on the subway and buses for 2-3 hours a day, sort of hostage to their phones or their iPads, and they're reading and shopping during those 2 to 3 hours while they're commuting. Whereas we don't really have that. Most of our commuters are by car or bicycle or what have you, and you can't really use your phone during that time. But this is a fantastic time to be reaching out to these potential customers. And so, as Kanzo Nara alluded to, your website needs to be extremely functional and quick loading on a mobile phone, because that's where your customers are going to be coming from, particularly in Asia. I bring this up just very briefly because these living expenditures are very, very similar to what Hawaii demographics look like. Market research is extremely important, but at some point you have to say, I have enough information and I have to jump into this market or not. I'm going to give up, or I'm going to stay on it. And I'm going to dedicate the next 2 to 3 years to this market, and I'm going to, just try our best and not take on another market until we think we have this one under control. Let's talk about price. So again, Brian Suzuki talked a little bit about this, but there's so many parts that go into pricing. And if you're selling internationally, there's other things you have to think about, such as the shipping and the packaging and tariffs and customs inbound into Japan. If you're selling products like creams and lotions, skincare, food, these types of things, you will have testing that needs to be done so that the product is deemed safe for the Japan market. I've helped lots of companies do that. It's a rigorous process, but it's not super expensive, and it's not extremely time consuming, but it does need to be done. And a lot of our companies, I find, are not prepared for the types of information that those testing organizations in Japan will ask for. So we need to get prepared for that sort of stuff. Another term that may be new to an exporter who's just beginning the exporting adventure is a harmonized code. You will often see it abbreviated as an HS code. And you need to know what the HS code or codes are for your products and services, because those are international codes that your products are compared against for customs duties coming into countries. So your customers will ask you, what is the HS code for your product? And it's good to know that ahead of time. If you're going to a trade show, know what your HS code is, because the distributors in Japan are going to ask you for that, because they will then look up, oh, with this HS code, then we'll have to pay this 5%, 7%, 2% duty, whatever that is, coming into the country. It's basically a tax. I think you have to pay strict attention to the Japanese yen against the US dollar, how that works, and that means your products will feel more or less expensive depending on what the yen rate is against the dollar. Right now, US products feel somewhat cheaper than they have in the past, just because of the way it's about 114 yen per dollar right now. In my career, it has been as low as 78, meaning you get 78 yen for $1, and that would make US products seem incredibly cheap, whereas Japanese products were incredibly expensive. Here's just a trend over time, the yen versus dollar. But I point these out because if you're going to be involved in a foreign market, you need to be keeping an eye on the currencies that you're involved in, whether it's euros, Australian dollars, Indian rupees, whatever, because this is really what your customers are paying for that product. When you're creating quotes for your customers, price quotes, try to do it in Japanese if you can. But if you're going to do it in English, make it as simple as possible, and know the terms that are used in Japan typically. So is it 2% discount if they pay in 10 days, or is it net 30, or what have you? If you've never heard of the term letter of credit, please study up on that, because some customers may want to pay by letter of credit. That's really only applicable for larger orders, maybe say above $50,000. Can customers pay you by credit card? Often in Asia, we find that customers want a staggered payment, meaning, for example, they'll pay you 40% up front, 40% when you deliver the product, and then 10% after it's tested and meets all the quality requirements that the customer requires. So don't flinch if somebody asks for that. Of course, you can deny it and not do it. Everything's negotiable, but that's a typical way that things are done in Asia. More so than in the US, I think Asian customers are very concerned about the after sales service, meaning after they have the product, how do you treat them and how does the product hold up? Do they need training? Do they need, are there spare parts that need to be stocked locally? What happens for warranty claims? We've talked a lot about boxes of chocolate today, but what happens if the chocolate gets to Japan and it's melted or otherwise funky, the packaging is broken or bent or what have you? How do you handle that, right? And it's good to know that. Think about that ahead of time. That can save you a lot of frustration and money later. Brian talked a lot about shipping, and I only bring it up to make sure that it's all included in your pricing that the final customer would pay. And again, I allude to the Incoterms here. So shipping is complicated, to say the least, and it's not helped by the fact that we're just on some small islands out here in the middle of the ocean. There's no question that shipping by ocean is cheaper. Shipping in a full 20-foot or 40-foot container of products is much cheaper than shipping by air. But often our companies here in Hawaii are not shipping enough product to warrant shipping a full container. So then it tends to go by air. But there are other options. You can consolidate your ocean shipping with other companies who are shipping product to Japan and share the cost of that ocean shipping. So there's ways to do this, but people like Brian can certainly help you with that. The thing I just want to make sure that you understand from a marketing standpoint is that your shipping will greatly affect the price of the product and how quickly the customer can get it, what have you. Go through this brief example, but this is an example from an actual consulting project that I worked on showing air shipment versus ocean shipment, and trying to explain in some detail about shipping a $25 product, one product, plus $31 of shipping cost, comes out to approximately $70 market price in Japan. So the shipping price per unit was $31. Now, if you send a bunch of those units in the same box, your shipping price comes down to $3.58 per unit, which is starting to get to be more manageable. And then if you're shipping in a container, shipping a lot of them on a pallet, you can get your shipping cost down to actually 20 cents per unit, which has almost no effect on the price whatsoever. So this is a rather extreme example, but it's a real example of something that I worked on. And so I'd like you to take this to heart, that I believe that our Hawaii companies really need to start getting to the point where they can ship pallets of product by ocean and get it pre-positioned in the Japanese market so that when customers order it, they can get it shipped to them very quickly in Japan within just a couple of days and that the overall shipping cost per unit for that product is really quite low. And it could even be lower than, say, dealing with the US mainland shipping costs. Here's just some resources that you can look up when you have time to different shipping companies. These are both air and potentially ocean, and then of course Hawaii Air Cargo, which you already know about. We talked about price, we talked about the distribution models. I've included here some links to major Japanese distributors, largely department stores and bookstores and this kinds of things, apparel. These are companies that are known to have bought from Hawaii in the past. Of course, there's many others. The list for your particular product is probably exhaustive. So there's plenty. Now, I'm going to talk about it just one more time because I really think we have to drive it home. Our companies have to be front and foremost putting out that made in Hawaii, made with aloha type of marketing plan, getting the images of Hawaii out there into the world. It goes a long way. And if you've ever joined one of my international marketing classes, you've heard me use this example of there is a place in the world, in Europe, called Transylvania. When you hear the word Transylvania, you have word association with something entirely different than the word association you have with aloha or with Hawaii, for example. People in Transylvania are trying to export their products, right? So my point is that the word association that you get by shipping product from Hawaii is absolutely fantastic. And we need to maximize that and exploit it as much as we can. So enough on that. I think you understand where I'm coming from. Now, there's no secret that in the United States, we tend to be really English centric. I think you could make the argument that the parts of the US are quite Spanish fluent, but still English is predominant, and we tend to forget that there are other languages. If you're dealing with Japan, you will quickly find that Japan is not English friendly, and that you cannot use Google Translate. You cannot use these things effectively for sentences and paragraphs that are specific to your product. For one word here and there, yes, I think it's fine. But even still, it's much better to have a native Japanese speaker and writer helping you with your marketing messaging. And just like in English, there's people who are good speakers who may not be good writers. And that would be the same in any other language. There may be somebody you know who's a native Japanese speaker, but they don't necessarily write very well. So this is something you have to find to get your messaging on point. Another thing I think is really important in the promotional part of dealing with Japan, in the promotional part of marketing, is the seasonal discounts, seasonal sales. Of course, you're familiar in the US, we have Christmas sales, and we have Labor Day sales, maybe for school clothes and things like this. But the Japanese market is largely driven by sales, and it's good to get these on your calendar ahead of time so that you can plan and have, for example, winter clearance sales. September has the summer clearance sales. Then, of course, you have Golden Week sales. And if you can have these on your website available to Japanese consumers that clearly point out that it's the summer sale, the Golden Week sale, they're already in the mode to buy. And if they see that on your website, they're much more likely to click through it and actually purchase something. So I highly recommend you get involved in this. Now, my personal experience with the Japanese market is that yes, these sales seasons are very prominent, and that the Japanese economy sort of rotates around these sales. But other markets would be the same. There's Germany, Russia, whatever, they will have their own types of sales season. But my experience is that Japan it's extremely important to understand these sales cycles. Social media, I won't cover this much other than to say it's important. Kanzo Nara covered it in great detail. But I think that it's important to get something going in social media in the Japanese language. Here's what I recommend in the short term is using a service like a Hootsuite or Buffer. There's others like Crowdfire, Agora Pulse that are services where you can publish your social media posts to multiple platforms all at the same time. It just saves a lot of time rather than logging into Twitter and logging into Facebook or what have you. You can do it all in sort of one button push. I think you need to have some Japanese verbiage on your website soon. If you are serious about getting involved in the Japanese market, you need to have this Japanese right here. It says Nitsuite is essentially equal to about us. And if you go to any Japanese website, you'll see that Nitsuite on there. And you click on that and it gives you the about us in Japanese. And I think for our companies that are just getting involved in exporting to Japan, that just having this about us paragraph or two is enough for now until you start to build up your language capability inside your company. That just having that would be great. And I also suggest getting an email address that's based on the top level domain of your company. So my company, the legal name of my company is Insight InterAsia. So rather than you putting out into the world that my main email address is insight.interasia@gmail.com, I would rather see our companies using a domain that they own and using, in this case, insightinterasia.com as your email address. I think that gives companies as potential customers, it just gives them a better feeling about your company, that it's legitimate. Not that your company isn't legitimate. I'm just suggesting that it helps customers feel more comfortable about your company, that there's something behind it and you have your own domain. The other thing you need to start doing is keeping a database of your customers. I'm sure you do something like that now with your Hawaii or mainland customers, but you need to start doing it for your Japanese customers. And that includes understanding what is their Japanese name in kanji and keeping track of that, and being able to differentiate between what is their family name and what is their given name and what is the kanji that they use, what have you. Just start with a simple Excel spreadsheet, but eventually you can move into more CRM type software, the content or the customer relationship management software. I still believe strongly in email newsletters, and if you are sending the messages to the target market segment that we talked about earlier, the target market segment is not going to find your email newsletters to be irritating. They're going to find them to be informative and interesting. The people who will find them to be irritating are the ones that are outside of your target market segment. And that's where I suggested strongly that you have to give up on those people and move on to just this target market segment. But email newsletters are great. Of course, you're probably familiar with MailChimp and Constant Contact and some of the big companies too. I tend to like a smaller company called Direct Mail Mac. That's just because I'm kind of Mac Apple oriented, and it just helps me with that. But certainly the other MailChimp, Constant Contact, Mad Mimi, and many others are very reputable companies and have good pricing for sending email newsletters. Oh, I would like to point out one other quick thing here on Japanese fonts. As in English, there are fonts that are conservative. There are fonts that are younger and hip, for lack of a better term. There are fonts that suggest a certain lifestyle. There's this, there's that, there's Arial and Helvetica and millions of others. It's the same in Japanese. So work with somebody like a Kanzo Nara to determine what is the best font for your website and for your printed marketing materials that conveys the image of your company, right? You don't want to necessarily go into the Japanese market using literature that's printed in wingdings or whatever the English version of that font would be. I suggest tracking your emails. This is a screenshot from Direct Mail Mac, but there's others that you could do the same, where you're figuring out people are opening your emails from what type of device, what time of day did they do it, how often did they open it, what have you. It's very easy to do. It's very inexpensive to do this through MailChimp or the other services, but please start doing that. Eventually, you're going to move on beyond just tracking your customers in an Excel spreadsheet, and you'll need some customer relationship management platform. Salesforce.com is by far the biggest, but there's others. If you're Gmail oriented, then Insightly is a good one, but there's many others that could suit your particular customer and you and how that works. But you do have to use it and use it religiously in order to make it work. And it helps remind you who are your most important customers, who are the customers you haven't touched in a month or 3 months or what have you. And I think that it's a very strong and important tool to the sales oriented company. Many of our speakers today have talked about trade shows, and I can't stress that strongly enough. We're very lucky in Hawaii that DBET has pavilions that they buy into and allow our companies to go into those pavilions at just a fraction of the cost. Jamie Lum from DBET had suggested it's maybe a quarter of the price, but I think it's actually much less. If you were going to a trade show in Japan, for example, you could easily spend on your own with travel and hotel and the booth fees and carpeting and furniture for the booth and your marketing literature and all these things. It would be easy to spend $15,000 to just go to one trade show. But I think going into one of these pavilions, maybe spending $2,500 or so, and it's really an incredible deal. So you have to get some business cards when you go to a trade show. You should be bilingual. Pretty much just your name is the only thing you need to be bilingual about, and maybe title of your title within your company. It could be owner or president or whatever it is. That's about all you need. You don't have to translate your whole address in Japanese or what have you. We'll come to this later in cultural issues, but remember that throughout much of Asia, let's say most of Asia, but particularly in Japan, people tend to put their family name first and then their given name second. So there's always some confusion about that when you're first meeting people, what is their family name and what is their given name. You spend enough time in Japan, it's obvious what is their family name. But when you're first getting new to it, it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to ask them. So are you Suzuki-san? Is that the right way to pronounce this? And I think that, don't be shy about that kind of thing. But anyway, get your bilingual business cards. Now, throughout Asia, and it's starting to get to be more popular in the US, but I still think in Asia and really in China, it's incredible that these QR codes, and I have an example here on the right of a QR code. And if you were to scan that code with your phone, it would give you my telephone number and my email address and what have you. But these are great to put on your card. They're free to generate. You can easily get free apps that help you generate these QR codes. And then you put them on your business card. You can put them on your marketing literature, what have you. And it helps people. They could scan it and go right to your website. If you're making a promotion for, say, the summer, let's say Golden Week sales, you could have a QR code that takes them just to your website, Golden Week sale 2022, for example. So get used to these QR codes because they're everywhere in Asia. The other thing I think a lot of Americans don't realize is that the rest of the world, not just Japan, but the rest of the world really functions on a different size paper than we use. This paper here, you can see, is 8.5 by 11. We call that a letter size paper. But the standard paper size in the rest of the world is A4, and it's actually a little bit thinner and a little bit longer than 8.5 by 11 inch. So I bring this up because if you're printing literature to take to a trade show, you want to do it on A4 because if you hand them an 8.5 by 11, they'll take that to their office and it won't fit in any files or anything. So it's just kind of a pain in the neck. And they eventually just throw out that paper rather than actually use it and read it later. So try whenever possible to use A4 size paper. It's not easy to find A4 paper in Hawaii, but you can print your literature locally in Japan, and it's much cheaper than printing it here and taking it to Japan. So just think about that. Notify your customers ahead of time before the trade show. I see a lot of our Hawaii companies don't do this, and let them know you're coming and set up appointments at the trade show and try to get them to come. And maybe there's some incentive to come, an extra 2% discount if they place a purchase order at the show or something, get them, lure them in. The other thing that I get kind of irritated about is that a lot of our Hawaii companies will go to a trade show, say in Japan, and immediately after the show, they head to the airport and go home. And I think that that's a huge opportunity loss where they should be out in country for at least a day, but 2 or 3 days would be great. And looking around, going into shops and seeing what packaging is like, maybe visit potential distributors, see what their shops are like, what kind of warehouse capability they have, what have you. But just use your opportunity. Don't look at the trade show as just this kind of island that you land on and then leave immediately. You don't see the rest of the environment around the island. Right? I think that, as I said, that's a big opportunity lost. We're going to have a seminar in January that I'm arranging right now on just these online retailers, Rakuten and Amazon Japan. And I think if you're interested in the Japanese market, you should look for that. It's on January 6th, Hawaii time, and we'll have some people, some presenters from Japan, January 7th, their time. So please come back for that. Kanzo talked about mobile commerce in Japan, but I think that it's extremely important to drill down into that and make sure you understand that most of the interactions with your customers are going to be on a mobile phone. And it's not entirely different from the US, but it's more mobile than the US, I would say. You see a lot of these publications around, and they can be great depending on your type of product. They're not cheap, so you can't go into this blindly. It's good to understand who are the readers of these magazines and what your potential benefit is from advertising in them, but they can be extremely useful. And there's really two types. There's one that you would buy that a Japanese consumer would pick up while they're in Hawaii. And then the next one would be magazines that are sold on a newsstand or by mail in the Japanese market. So these tend to be a bit cheaper. These tend to be pretty expensive. So just a small ad in here could be as much as $10,000 a month. So just keep that in mind. Kanzo Nara alluded to the idea of bloggers. And I think that this is an extremely important topic for dealing with the Japanese market in particular, because bloggers have an outsized impact on the Japanese market, I think, compared to other markets that I work in, meaning there are Hawaii file people out there who are writing blogs and posting them, and people come and read those blogs, and then they go to the shops, they buy the clothes, they get the spa treatments in Hawaii that those bloggers recommend and review. So find out who they are and get them to blog about you. That's really the easiest way to put it. It's very helpful. Another simple thing that's easy to do and quite inexpensive is to get a Japanese telephone number in Tokyo or Osaka or wherever your particular target market segment might be. I personally use Ring Central for a lot of these phone numbers, but there's other services where you could get a Japanese number and it rings to your mobile phone, or you tell it where to ring to, and you can change it all the time. If you have a local distributor, you could ring it to their phone. If it's during your work hours, it could ring to your phone. I think it's great way to show your customers that you're in market, you're there, you're able to do it. The number costs somewhere around $15 per month, which I think is pretty manageable for most companies. But it comes with the caveat that if you're going to have such a number in Japan, somebody that answers the phone needs to speak Japanese. Again, if you're going to set up a number in Brazil, make sure they speak Portuguese when they answer your phone. We talked about all of the 4 Ps, I think. So let's just jump into coming towards the summary here is what can you do today? What are sort of the best practices? And I break it into a couple different phases, but let's just say starting now, what can you do to get your company ready to start selling in Japan? So you create a living document on your computer called Japan Marketing Plan. And it's a living plan because you're going to come back to it often and update it as more information comes in. Begin to define that target market segment. As I said, it's not 126 million people. That is the entire population of Japan. But you're probably 1 million or less, 100,000 people. You'll need to figure that out. But start your working on your marketing messaging to only that target market segment. Put some Japanese verbiage on the front page of your website, just that neat suite about us, a couple paragraphs that starts to tell the story of you and your product, your company, and what it is that makes it unique and interesting. And of course, the building and the made with aloha part of it is important. Start your social media posts in Japanese. I would say just do 1 out of 10 of your social media posts can be in the Japanese language, and use Japanese hashtags. You could set up an email address for your domain. Let's say your domain is example.com. You could set up japan@example.com, and somebody will respond in Japanese to that email address. You could put that japan@example.com address in the Japanese verbiage that we just talked about above. Try to send a Japanese email newsletter within the next 3 months, and learn how to monitor how they're open, when they're open, on what kind of device they're open in. Start a database of your Japanese customers and distributor contacts and what have you, and get used to tracking their Japanese names using the kanji. Of course, you can put the Romanized English version of their names too, because if you don't read kanji well, then you're not going to know what that name even says. But I think you need to start tracking that. Try to attend a major trade show in 2022 in Japan. You don't necessarily need a booth. You could just walk around your first show for 3 days or however long the show lasts. But get out into the market too, Tokyo, or wherever you're going, and look around, look at the packaging, look at the pricing, look at how it's displayed in the stores and what have you, and get a feeling for what's different and what you need to do in order to get your product purchasable in the Japanese market. Meet with shipping companies, meet with logistics people, meet with O'Brien Suzuki, and go over your shipping costs and show them your product, and figure out what does it cost to ship one, what does it cost to ship 10, 100, 1,000, etc. Know these costs ahead of time and ask them their advice on your packaging and how shippable is the product, and if there's anything that needs to be taken into account. Start investigating how to pre-position physical product in Japan at a fulfillment center or at a warehouse or something like that. You don't have to start stocking it immediately, but start understanding what those costs are so that you are ready in a couple of years to do that. Look at purchasing a .jp address or something along the lines of what Kanzo Nara had talked about, with a subdomain on your domain, .jp.example.com, and talk to a Kanzo about that sort of thing. Larry Foster had talked about the trademarking. Get on that immediately. It's not expensive, but it's something I think you should really do immediately, because you will lose your logo if somebody, there are nefarious people out there who will take that logo and take it hostage and make you pay for it later. Even I've seen people lose their logos and their taglines and what have you through not so nefarious purposes, but an agent, say a Japanese agent, thought, hey, this Hawaii company, they're going to do well in the Japanese market, and we want to sell their products, so we're going to buy Maui honey .jp. And later the relationship turns sour, and the Hawaii company doesn't own Maui honey.jp. The Japanese company still does. And so it just causes a lot of problems. It's just better to get, and the logo and all of that stuff, they own it already. So it's better just to get as much of that done up front as you can before you start going into these foreign markets. This is how you would start attacking the market for visitors to Hawaii from Japan. So a lot of it's the same, but I think that I'd skip down towards the middle here where you need to get some of your verbiage at your point of sale, whether it's a farmer's market or it's your website in Japan or wherever you're selling the product to the Japanese visitors, get Japanese verbiage up there quickly, and then work on that omiyage concept with packaging and nice bags that are part and parcel of your product, right? Just build that into the cost and make sure you give them a good wrapping around the package and then a nice bag. And that alleviates so much trouble for the buyer. Just these are best practices overall that you should be, if you're serious about the Japanese market, this is what you'll be doing 2 to 3 years from now on a daily basis. I won't cover everything here, but you can look at this later. Just some general resources about working in Japan, selling products in Japan. You have a lot of help here in Hawaii that I think you can jump into. My nonprofit organization that I volunteer with is the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. But of course, DBET, you met Jamie Lum earlier today. The U.S. Commercial Service has an employee, great guy here in Hawaii. He's actually by law, the secretary of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council is John Holman. He's your window to all of the U.S. Commercial Service officers at the embassies and consulates around the world. Excuse me, we have the Foreign Trade Zone down at Pier 2 in Honolulu, a wonderful facility. And then there's other, of course, Hawaii Department of Agriculture, depending on your product. We had a webinar with them just last month, and it's recorded and put on the Hawaii Pacific Export Council YouTube channel. So go back and look at that. And of course, you have a consulate here from Japan who can help a lot. I found that the website of Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare has a lot of information for Hawaii exporters because there's testing regulations and those types of things are displayed there. And some of it's in English, and it's very useful information, and just generally more resources that are available to you. Export.gov or trade.gov, it has a lot of really good information for the beginning exporter to get your hands around what are some of the issues about shipping to Japan. And then I think the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan, if you got serious about the Japanese market, it would be interesting to join them. It's not expensive, but there's a lot of other companies there that you can learn from. And that's it. So I'm going to leave this open for just a second in case you have any questions. This is my contact information. And next, I'm going to jump into cultural issues very briefly. We're a little bit behind schedule. So I talked about some of this in marketing, and others have talked about it as well, but I think it's important to go over some of this specifically. It's no secret to anybody that Japan is a foreign country. I mean, that's why we're talking about exports, but it's foreign in other ways too for people from the United States and from Hawaii, even though in Hawaii, we share a lot of cultural similarities with Japan, and we have lots of people in Hawaii who even have Japanese family names and what have you. Still, Japan is can be quite a different place. Now, that goes for any other country, Korea, France, Argentina, what have you. But we're sort of focused on Japan, so let's talk about that for a second. These are just things that I've learned over time. But when you're going and thinking about getting involved in a new market, say you're traveling to a trade show for the first time, I find that there's a book that's been in publication for decades now, called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. But I think it's invaluable for the international traveler and somebody who's just getting involved in these markets, where it sort of gives you a country by country overview of the market and how things are done there on a personal basis, right? And how you should greet people and talk to people, and talks a little bit about the language and the religion and how to introduce yourself and things like that. I think it's really good. Now, they give basically equal time to Japan that they might to a smaller market that Hawaii companies don't have as much business in. But still, I think it's something to just have on your bookshelf and refer to it as you're doing more and more international business. So let's just cover a couple of these topics in detail. We'll go over a few things that I've learned in my 30 years of selling products internationally, particularly in Asia. I talked about it before, but I can't stress enough that English is not used in Japan. And I find that there are people in Hawaii who have met some people from Japan who speak English, and therefore they think that everybody in Japan can speak English well. And it's simply not true. If you show up to a trade show in Japan and start speaking English, people will panic. And so we need to take that into account, that when you're dealing with Japan, you need to do as much of it as possible in Japanese. And so my philosophy has always been about sales and marketing and trying to advise companies on how to run their business, is that you want to make it as easy as possible for the customer to buy from you. And if the customer speaks Japanese and reads Japanese, well, that means your product literature and these types of things needs to be in Japanese. And that's all there is to it. It's sort of no middle ground there, and there's no negotiation about that. If you're serious about selling to that market, you need to adapt to the market. The market is not going to adapt to you. And that's just a cold, harsh fact of reality for sales. So get your information in Japanese. When you're going into another market, be conscious of the religion. And it's just something you don't need to talk about it, but know what is the local religion there. If you're working, a huge growing market of importance for US companies is Indonesia. It's the largest Muslim country in the world. It's in Asia, but it's the largest Muslim country in the world. And it's just the kind of thing where you need to know what to talk about, what not to talk about, what to eat, what can't people eat for religious reasons, etc. And so again, you have to be a little bit of a cultural chameleon and just keep your eyes open and be open to other ways of doing things, and don't expect people to adopt your ways and adapt to your ways of doing things. Some countries like Japan, I think Korea to a certain point, are still quite formal compared to the United States, or maybe even Hawaii in particular. I think Hawaii is not a very formal place, but Japan certainly is. You'll see people, men and women, still wearing suits, dark suits, business formal type of clothing. And so just understand that if you're at a trade show, I think it's perfectly reasonable to wear your aloha wear, because you're playing up the aloha-ness of your Hawaii-ness of your products and services. But if you're going to their factory to a business meeting, probably that aloha wear needs to be dialed down a little bit, and you might need a sport coat, what have you, maybe even a tie, which I think is pretty difficult for a lot of our local companies to hear, but that's just the way it is. So do a little research ahead of time and figure out what is the best attire for the audience that you're going to be in front of. Then obviously, do you bow or shake hands? And in Europe, you kiss people too that you don't even know when you're first meeting them. So it's good to understand this before you go in. But in Japan, I would say there's something you need to learn about exchanging the business card. I don't know if you can see my hands, but you present your business card with two hands and the name, your name pointing to them, and that's how you'll accept a card from them. And the more quickly you can learn how to do these types of things, the more comfortable you're making your customers feel. The more comfortable they're feeling, the easier it is for them to buy from you. It's still quite common in Asia to have entertainment with your customers and going out and eating and drinking and doing these kinds of things. So don't be surprised at that, and actually look for it and enjoy it, and go out and use it as an opportunity to get to know them better and let them get to know you and see you're a real person. You're not just a company and a product, but you're a person, and you'll back up the products that you're selling to them. We talked about A4. This is an important pet peeve of mine, so I'm not going to get into that. But I would also encourage you strongly to look at this date format and try to understand that in normal American and Hawaii written language, we would put today's date as 12/9/21. But in much of the world, that could actually mean September 12th. And so I see constantly a lot of confusion about this. However, if you adopt this format that I suggest, nobody can go wrong with that, right? Try to get away from the 12/9/21 and get into this mode all the time, even when you're dealing with your American customers, Hawaii customers. Use this date format, and it just takes away a lot of problems, particularly internationally, because if you're using the 12/9/21 format, you will have lots of problems internationally, a lot of confusion, and you can head it all off by just doing this. Another thing I see a lot of our Hawaii companies, I think that in Hawaii, our culture is very huggy. We hug people a lot. You go to Japan, there's not a lot of hugging, and even people you've known well for a couple of years, you won't hug them. And so try not to do that. Even I think people you've known for a couple of years, maybe they will shake your hand. But at first you should just be working on bowing. And then after some time, they might feel comfortable enough and shake your hand. But I don't think you ever want to get into the hugging situation. It never pans out very well. But I see that some of our companies trying to hug people that in Japan, and it's always incredibly awkward. So those are some of the cultural things that I've observed over time, and I would just like to leave it at that. I think if you can go into these foreign markets with wide eyes and be humble and just try to learn and try your best not to say things like, well, at home we do it this way, or back home it's done this way, or nobody cares, right? Just try to learn as much as you can about the local culture and the way that they do things. And I think it'll make you for one thing, it's interesting, but I think it'll make you a more successful business person later when you're able to come back home and start to define that target market segment messaging and get the products ready for that foreign market. Because as I said, you have to live by this adage that you have to make it as easy as possible for your customers to buy from you. Now, we're already way past time, so I would like to very quickly jump into the financial discussion. I think that it's important, but if you look at our Hawaii Pacific Export Council YouTube archive, you will see some specific cases on exporting with regards to finance, and there's several webinars that are targeted just towards this. So I'm only going to go through this very briefly because it's an important part of exporting, and I think you need to have some of these words in your vocabulary. But at the end of the presentation, really the key takeaway is that you need a banker, and you need to have a relationship with that banker, and you need to go in and see the banker and explain to the banker what you're trying to accomplish in this foreign market. So same with the logistics person, same with the IT kind of e-commerce website person. You need to go in and meet with them and get their number on your speed dial so that you can contact them with questions and know who they are, and so they know who you are ahead of time. So we talked about pricing already, so I'm not going to spend too much time with this, but jump in here to check with your bank before you negotiate your sale to make sure that they can handle the payment method that you and your customer are agreeing upon. So the payment method could be cash, although that's pretty rare anymore. It's not impossible. If a customer wanted to pay you $50,000, but in Japanese yen, could your bank handle that? As I said, it's not that common, but it happens. Can they handle letters of credit? That's a term you will hear for larger payments. As I suggested earlier, maybe above 50,000. That's not a steadfast rule, but that somewhere in there it becomes a legitimate payment term. Credit card, can your bank process the credit card from a foreign country? Could they handle a direct wire payment? Probably can, but what is that going to cost you? If a company from Japan sends you $10,000 by wire, what does that cost you to receive that wire? That's important to know, because not all banks are the same, and not all accounts in that bank are the same. An inbound wire could cost you $150, or it could cost you $40. It sort of depends on the bank, and it depends on the type of account you have with the bank. So just try to understand all of these things ahead of time, not as you're making the sale, right, and trying to negotiate with your customer. So there's lots of different potential payment schemes. Payment in advance is the best for you, meaning a company orders $100,000 worth of your product, and you tell the company, well, before I do anything, before I make it, before I do anything, you're going to send me $100,000, and then I'll start to manufacture it and I'll ship it to you. Now, that's great for you, but the customer is going to say, well, that's not really great for me. So that's where the negotiation comes in, and you have to figure out, well, could it be the staggered payment that we talked about earlier? 40%, 40%, 20%, that kind of thing. So again, do they send you money by wire? Do they pay by credit card? Or is it some combination thereof? They pay 50% by credit card and then 50% by wire later when you're ready to ship. All of this is open for negotiation, but I think you need to have standard terms and conditions that you state, this is what the way we do business, and then you negotiate from there. Of course, the buyer is going to have the way they do business, but anyway, just make sure your bank can handle it ahead of time. Compared to when I first started my international career, where at that time most things were done by letters of credit. Now you have the internet and PayPal and all kinds of things. So it's not difficult to have a customer pay yen, but you actually get dollars. And some organization in the middle, like PayPal, does the conversion for you. Of course, there's a fee to be paid for that. 4% is not uncommon and could even be more depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So try to understand all of this ahead of time. Like if you're not going to use your bank, then who are you going to use? PayPal or some other type of organization? And what happens if the customer cancels the order later? Does PayPal refund them everything, or how does that work? Know all of this way in advance, please. As I said, letters of credit can still be interesting, particularly when the companies don't know each other very well, and it actually is a relationship between the banks. So you could have Bank of Hawaii, First Hawaiian, Central Pacific, or American Savings Bank, or whoever it happens to be your bank. They would set up a relationship with a bank in the foreign country that you're operating from, and you would work out the verbiage that's in this contract. They're saying, okay, when we ship the product, it triggers a payment from the foreign bank to your bank, and when the product arrives at the dock in Japan, it triggers another payment. Then when the shipment arrives at the site and is installed and the customer is happy with it, then it triggers a final payment, something like that. But it's really a relationship between the two different banks of the parties that are involved. Bills of exchange, not uncommon for some parts of Asia, but I think for Japan, it's much less common these days. And it's much more likely that you'll be dealing with wires and credit cards and PayPal and maybe a letter of credit for a large order. So open account, this means after you get to know your customer and they know you, you can offer credit to them. 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it is. I would also add that this next slide talks about EXIM's credit insurance. And later in 2022, we're going to have a specific webinar on with EXIM and SBA and their programs. But EXIM has a great program where you get your customer to fill out a form with some of their financial information on it, and you submit it to EXIM, and EXIM does a credit check on them internationally. And if EXIM approves them, which they almost always approve for $50,000 to $100,000 minimum credit, it means you can ship product to that customer and allow the customer to pay net 30 or net 60, depending on how you work that out with EXIM and your customer, and that you're protected for that shipment, that you get very cheap credit insurance on the value of that order. And I think it's a fabulous program of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, and I hope you look into that more. Very cheap credit insurance for you. Here's some of the requirements for credit insurance, but I think almost all of our companies in Hawaii will immediately qualify for this. And we talked about, in the pricing section of my marketing talk, we talked about foreign exchange tips, but I think you really have to get used to understanding the currency that you're going to be operating in. In our case today, we're talking about Japan generally. So get used to the Japanese yen, and at least weekly check it, what it is. But most people check it who are really working in a foreign market, they'll check it daily and understand the trends. You know, is it going up over time? Is it going down over time? And that really impacts how your customers feel about the product. If the product feels expensive or if it feels cheaper, you need to have your fingers on the pulse of that feeling and understand what's going on there. And it's not difficult. You can look this up online anywhere and see the trends. But of course, the newspapers and others publish this information all the time, especially in a big primary market like Japan. You'll be able to find that information easily. So financing options, there's several ways to do this that a lot of the new exporters are getting into, but it's a lot of the same topic of when you're first starting your company. But when you're first starting exporting, who's going to finance my exporting adventure here? And more often than not, it comes out of the business itself. But maybe not. Maybe the owner has to put in some of his or her own money to get this exporting thing going. Could come out of from one of the vendors wants to be involved in it. You could be consigning products to somebody in Japan, and then they pay you as the products are sold. It takes a lot of trust on your part to do that, but it's done. There's some grants that are available. Angel investors are out there, crowdfunding to a certain degree, although I wouldn't focus too much on that, but there have been some people who are available there. And then under borrow, this used to be called the FFF, which is family, friends, and fools part of it. But that's a very typical way of doing things, is just borrowing money from people and getting going. If you're looking for a loan package from the bank, or specifically an SBA, Small Business Administration backed loan, these are what you will need. You'll certainly need a business track record. It doesn't have to be an international business track record, but just a business track record. And then a detailed business plan is really important. And I know that they're very interested in your accounts receivable and accounts payable and how that's working internally. And then how getting the loan works for these types of international projects. It's pretty typical. I think you could imagine what they're looking for. Here's what the banks tend to look at and what the SBA backed loans will be looking at: the 5 C's of credit: character, capacity to repay, capital, collateral, and then the current market conditions. So I strongly suggest you look at US SBA and see what's available from them. If you have a decent business plan, you have a good product, they have this express export program, which can qualify you for up to $500,000, and then even $5 million of working capital later if you actually need that much. And it can be helpful. I've seen it really kickstart some companies' export ideas. Pretty straightforward of what's available, how you can get an SBA loan and what you need to be doing. Here's another acronym that you'll need to know if you don't know already. What is your NAICS code? I forget what that means entirely, but NA is North American. And that came about, I think, from NAFTA originally. And so, like we talked about much earlier, the harmonized code is an international code. This NAICS code is really your US domestic product code. And they're, depending on your products and services, you could have 2 or 3 NAICS codes that your company is involved with. But it's good to know that ahead of time, what your NAICS code is. And it's easy to look up. And it, for example, if you make skincare products, you make chocolate, you make clothes, whatever your product is, it's easy to find in the NAICS database. What is your code? So these are the types of products that are companies that are ineligible for the Small Business Administration financing. I think if you're listening to this webinar, you're very unlikely to be involved in any of these types of products and services. So it's not really an issue, but nonetheless, you should know what they are. And then the Export Express conditions, what needs to be available here. I won't cover everything, but, and again, I can make these presentations available to anybody who wants them. You can look at it later. Here's the loan available up to $500,000, which again, I've seen this be very integral to getting some export initiatives off the ground for some of our companies. Here's what you need for that $5 million loan. I don't think any of our companies today on this webinar are interested in this, but it's good to know that it exists for a few years down the line after you're wildly successful at your initial export ventures. And this is how you would get ramping up on things and really attack a new market beyond that. So there's some markets you can't work in, and particularly can't work in if you want any kind of US government assistance. And those are sort of the obvious usual suspects. So it's not a lot of point in covering all of them. And again, I think most of our companies here in Hawaii are first and foremost targeting Japan, Korea, and then Canada and Mexico, which are great trade partners. Okay, there's plenty of help out there. Local organizations such as SCORE, wonderful, another group, the Small Business Development Center, and Minority Business Development Agency all have great local staff here that I know well, and I highly suggest you reach out to them for any questions. And here's the contact for the SBA there. Okay, I'm going to wait a minute if anybody has any questions. I appreciate you sticking with us for almost 4 hours. If you have any questions, type them in. And I'm going to bring up the websites real quick again, just to make sure I've got everybody covered. So just as a reiteration, this is the HiSTEP webpage. If you're not registered, please register for this DBET program, and at least get on the emailing list so you can keep up with us on the various webinars that we're going to have. The organization that I volunteer with is the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, and here is our YouTube archive. This video will eventually, within a week, be on this archive too. So please look back. We have nearly 100 videos here, so I hope you can go back and see topics that you're particularly interested in. Here's the Hawaii Pacific Export Council webpage. You can see what's going on here and what we're up to. Kanzo Nara's company. Here's his other website development company. Here's Brian Suzuki's Hawaii Air Cargo. Here's my real day job as the Asia sales manager. And then I had brought up these Incoterms at trade.gov. Okay, so with that, I'd like to thank you very much for attending today. I hope it gave you, in sort of at the 30,000 foot level, some broad ideas about what you are getting involved in if you're going to be doing exporting. And then please look for our upcoming webinars this year. Here's the topics that we'll be doing. We'll have a Australia, New Zealand specific event, and we have almost every year we do a Japan specific event, and then sprinkled in with logistics, and it goes into much more detail than we did today. So I encourage you to please attend when you can. And with that, I would like to say mahalo. Thank you for attending. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you back next year in 2022.